allocated to 5 defence growth deals, including one in Northern Ireland, will see its booming defence sector thrive.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Minister for his answer. Airbus, which manufactures satellites in my Stevenage constituency, will soon be integrating the civil aircraft wing business at the historic Shorts site in Belfast, close to where Thales test their satellites and produce vital missiles for Ukraine. Will the Minister work with colleagues across government and the Northern Ireland Executive to ensure that the Defence Industrial Strategy is complemented with the Industrial Strategy's Advanced Manufacturing Sector Plan so as to maximise skills, innovation and growth?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. He is right to highlight the rich expertise in Northern Ireland's defence sector, which brings benefits right across the UK, including to Stevenage, and I can assure him the Secretary of State and I will work across government and with the Executive to ensure a joined-up approach that benefits Northern Ireland.
Thanks, Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm incredibly proud of the naval engineering history that we have in the Black Country, including at companies like Summers Forge in Hellsowen and Brooks Forgings in Cradley Heath. So I'm delighted that this Labour government is increasing defence spending to levels never seen under the last government. Does he agree with me that that investment in Northern Ireland at places like Holland and Wolf will not just benefit the local economy there, but the supply chain all across the country?
He's absolutely right. I warmly welcome this investment, and I know my honourable friend is rightly proud of the defence expertise in his own constituency. Backed by this Labour government, increasing defence spending to 2.5%, Holland and Wolf is building the next generation of support ships for our Royal Navy. We are safeguarding jobs, skills and our future security.
Rick Campbell.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Minister to his place and also welcome the Defence Growth Deal. Would he agree with me that what needs to happen now is that he needs to work with the Northern Ireland Executive to ensure that the supply chain within Northern Ireland extends beyond Holland and Wolf and beyond the Greater Belfast area so that everyone in Northern Ireland can benefit from what is potentially a life-changing development for industry in Northern Ireland?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank him for his warm words. He's absolutely right. We need to make sure we're working across Northern Ireland to ensure this life-changing investment he mentioned, is felt right across Northern Ireland. I will make sure that happens.
Robin Swan.
Speaker, can I welcome the Minister to his place as well? And can I ask him to ensure there is that co-working across the Executive and the Ministry of Defence in regards to the Northern Ireland Executive's investment strategy also being integral to the Defence Industrial Strategy, and that the NIO will work to remove any blockages that would prevent the two being actually merged together?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank him for his warm words as well. Of course, we'll be working. I'll be meeting with Executive Ministers in Northern Ireland next week to discuss this and other matters. I'll ensure that any blockages that we can remove, we will do so working together.
Come on.
Question 5, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 5, 10 and 13 together. The Government is committed to repealing and replacing the Legacy Act with new arrangements that seek to command greater confidence in Northern Ireland. Yesterday we published the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill and a draft remedial order in order to do just that.
The Secretary of State announced this Labour government's new Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. Despite all the justifications for this bill, it still means one thing: veterans, many of whom are elderly, being dragged back through the courts. Does the Secretary of State think that is an acceptable way to treat those people who bravely served and defended our country?
Well, I say to the honourable gentleman, he says dragged back to court. Now, the only circumstances in which a veteran or anyone else appears in court is if they are charged with an offence. He will know perfectly well what the figures show about prosecutions, in the 27 years since the Good Friday Agreement. What we're talking about here is coroner's inquest. There will be a small number that will be restarted because they were already in train and were stopped by the last Legacy Act. The rest will go into the sifting process governed by the Solicitor General. We think we have a fair and reasonable framework that we're going to put in place to ensure that veterans are protected and properly looked after.
Rhys Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 25th of September, the Prime Minister assured the BBC that veterans would receive protections not afforded to paramilitaries. So can the Secretary of State confirm to the House which of the statutory protections will apply solely to veterans, or is it not the case that they will also extend to paramilitaries?
Well, I'll give him one example, which is representation of veterans on the statutory advisory group, drawing on the experience of Operation Canova that will be established. And that allows the voice of veterans to be heard, and that will be covered by Clause 8 of the legislation.
Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the concerns of dragging veterans through lawfare and our courts is the effect on army recruitment. So what's his reaction to Colonel Nick Kitson, the son of General Sir Frank Kitson, who said, how can anyone volunteer to put their life on the line for a government, indeed a nation, that does not have their back?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman, I meet many cadets who are very keen to join the armed forces, and we should pay tribute to all of those that are offering their services to the nation in defence of the realm, and we should not talk down the importance of that recruitment effort. I think if anybody looks in the round at what we are putting forward, they will think it is reasonable, and I've met many veterans, as the Veterans Commissioners have said, who will argue we're not looking for immunity under the law, which is what the Legacy Act gave. They're looking for fairness under it, and that is what we will provide.
Kemi Perkins.
Mr. Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree with me that people who join the British Army absolutely recognise that they have to abide by the law, but also expect the government will have their back and will offer them that fairness? Can he offer the assurance that people who've served in Northern Ireland will be given the same fairness that they should expect, and that this is a government that genuinely has their back?
I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance, and to take one other example of the protections, saying that no veteran will have to return to Northern Ireland to engage with legacy processes is something that was put to us by veterans in the discussions that we had. We are legislating for it in the bill.
Secretary of State Alex Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, unusually, I rise to congratulate the government on having admitted a terrible mistake. Earlier this year, this side of the House voted against Labour's draft remedial order, which would have allowed Gerry Adams to sue the taxpayer. So we welcome the fact that yesterday the Labour Party amended that order. But the question remains, why did they ever bring forward such a ridiculous policy in the first place?
Well, I hope that the honourable gentleman would say not only congratulations, but I hope that that is the spirit in which these discussions about legacy matters will continue. Because when I say I'm prepared to listen, I mean it. But I would just point out to him the problem arose because of the Supreme Court judgment, as he's well aware. For just over 2 years, the last government couldn't find a solution. The one that was put in place didn't work because it was found to be incompatible, but I have reflected on the point that was made in representations, and this will ensure that there is no gap, as it's been referred to, but we have found a mechanism which we believe will achieve what 46 and 47 sought to do but failed.
Alex Burkhardt.
Well, I invite the Secretary of State to look at his own legislation, because clauses 89 and 90 are markedly similar to the sections that we left him. Now, this side of the House may have won the battle over this, but we still haven't won the war to protect our veterans from vexatious complaints. But isn't it the truth, Mr. Speaker, that if it hadn't been for months of campaigning by the Conservative Party, by the Shadow Defence team, by the media, reports from Policy Exchange, which may now well have saved the taxpayer hundreds of millions of pounds, Labour would have stuck to their plan and allowed Mr. Adams and his comrades to sue anyway?
Well, I indicated to the House quite some months ago that we were determined to find a means of dealing with the Supreme Court judgment in 2020 on the subject of the Carltona principle. That is what our proposed legislation will seek to remedy. We think it's a better formulation than 46 and 47. I look forward to his support in passing it.
Andrew Rosendow.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is committed to safeguarding Northern Ireland's place in the UK internal market and implementing the Windsor Framework in good faith. The internal market scheme enables traders to move goods from Great Britain into Northern Ireland tariff-free, and since May with significantly reduced paperwork and checks.
It is a disgrace that the Safeguarding the Union provisions severely restrict trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, binding the province to 300 areas of EU law over which the people have no say. So, will the Secretary of State take steps to remove what is left of this damaging international trade border within our own nation and restore the birthright of the people of Northern Ireland as equal citizens of this United Kingdom?
Well, I'll just say to the honourable gentleman, those who advocated that we should leave the European Union, this is the consequence of it, because you had an open border, 2 different jurisdictions. How are you going to deal with trade in those circumstances? And secondly, the goods are flowing, the goods are moving. And if you look at the evidence, the Northern Ireland economy in the second quarter grew by 2%. That is not indicative of a problem.
Can the Minister Mike Wood?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 26th of November last year, the Health Secretary assured this House that the Tobacco and Vapes Bill will apply in Northern Ireland. Now, the Secretary of State will know that the age-based sales ban affects the placement of tobacco products on the market and so is potentially in breach of the EU's Tobacco Products Directive. So can the Secretary of State repeat the Health Secretary's assurance and also tell us whether the government has confirmed with the European Union that the ban will stand in Northern Ireland?
It is certainly the government's intention that the ban. It is certainly the government's intention that the ban will apply in Northern Ireland, because I think it's very important that young people all over the United Kingdom are protected in the way in which the bill seeks to do.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, can I welcome in the gallery the Honourable Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji and the Chairman of the Parliament of Ukraine. Members will also know that today marks the 4th anniversary of the death of our friend and colleague Sir David Amess, who was murdered in his Southend West constituency in 2021. Sir David was a long-serving Member of Parliament, respected and liked by members across the House, dedicated to his constituency. We remember him fondly. We come to Prime Minister's questions. Tom Rutland.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you've just said, today marks 4 years since the horrific murder of Sir David Amess. Sir David was much loved across the House, kind and generous, and I know it was a huge loss to many members opposite. May he rest in peace. As we remember Sir David and our friend Joe Cox, of course, I want to take this opportunity to condemn unequivocally the death threats made against the honourable member for Clacton. I know the House will welcome the justice that has been done. Whatever our disagreements, we are all parliamentarians, and I won't stand for violence or threats against our democracy. Mr. Speaker, on that point, may I update the House on the China spy case? I'm deeply disappointed by the outcome. We wanted to see prosecutions. Mr. Speaker, I know just how seriously, rightly, that you take these matters. National security will always be the first priority of this government, and we will always defend against espionage. In recent weeks, there have been baseless accusations put about by the party opposite. Let me set out the facts. The relevant period was when these offences took place. That was under the Conservative government between the years of 2021 and 2023. This period was bookended by the integrated review of 2021, the beginning of the period, and the refresh of that review in 2023, setting out their policy. These statements of government policy were very carefully worded to not describe China as an enemy. Instead,
Mr. Stewart, somebody who is on the Speaker's panel, I've told once before, should know better. Do not question my judgment. I thought it was important that the Prime Minister tells this House first, rather than somewhere else. So please, this is very important to me and very important to the House. I take it seriously, so I don't need any more side comments. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The review of 21 and the refresh of 23 were very carefully worded to not describe China as an enemy. Instead, they stated increased national security protections where China poses a threat, and that the then government would engage with China to leave room open for constructive and predictable relations. The Deputy National Security Advisor, Matt Collins, set out the then government's position in a substantive witness statement in 2023, which was subsequently supplemented by 2 further short statements. The Cabinet Secretary assures me that the DSNA faithfully set out the policy of the then Tory government. I know firsthand that the DSNA is a civil servant of the utmost integrity, and those opposite who worked with him, I'm sure, would agree with that assessment. Under this government, no minister or special advisor played any role in the provision of evidence. I can't say what the position was of the previous government in relation to the involvement of ministers or special advisors. If the Leader of the Opposition knows the answer to that question, and I suspect that she does, I invite her to update the House. Last night, the Crown Prosecution Service clarified that, in their view, the decision whether to publish the witness statements of the DSNA is for the government. I have therefore carefully considered this question this morning, and after legal advice, I have decided to publish the witness statements. Given the information contained, we will conduct a short process, but I want to make clear I intend to publish the witness statements in full. Let me say this. To be clear, had the Conservatives been quicker in updating our legislation, a review that started in 2015, these individuals could have been prosecuted and we would not be where we are without. I'm happy to answer any questions on this. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I visited Rayner, a world-leading provider of cataract solutions based in Worthing, a winner of this year's King's Award for Enterprise Innovation and a fantastic employer of local apprentices. So can I welcome the government's ambition to get 2/3 of our young people into an apprenticeship, further education or university, and ask the Prime Minister what he will do to ensure that every young person in East Worthing and Shoreham has the skills they need to thrive?
Thank you for this question. We want a country where young people are supported, where the quality of teaching is raised and every skilled apprentice is valued and respected. We've set a new target of 2/3 of young people to be in apprenticeships or university. That will smash the glass ceiling and renew our country. Mr. Speaker, we've supported this with record £3 billion budget for more apprenticeships, more technical colleges and guaranteed training, apprenticeship or work for all 18 to 21-year-olds.
The Opposition, Kemi.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for marking 4 years since the terrible murder of Sir David Amess. I know that the whole House will want to join me in remembering our former colleague. He is very much still in our hearts and minds. The way he died reminds us that the security of members and this Parliament is paramount. So it concerns us all that the case against 2 people spying on members of this House has collapsed. It is simply unbelievable. Exactly as I expected, the Prime Minister had to be dragged out at the top of PMQs to give a statement that answers no questions. I don't know what they're laughing. I don't know what they're laughing at. We are talking about the security of this Parliament. He had to be dragged out to repeat only more obfuscation. It is simply unbelievable. It is simply unbelievable that he is trying to say the last government did not classify China as a threat. So I will refresh his memory. In 2021, the previous government's integrated review described China as the biggest state-based threat to the UK's economic security. In 2024, the Minister for Security, said from that dispatch box that China poses a threat. But let's leave aside the government. In 2022, the Director General of MI5 in November classified China as a threat in his remarks. How is it possible that the government failed to provide the evidence that the CPS needed to prosecute?
The substantive evidence was provided in 2023 by the previous government. That is when the witness statement was submitted. I am going to disclose it. They will all be able to read it. The substantive evidence was written and disclosed and submitted in 2023 under the last government. I noticed she didn't indicate whether ministers were involved in that at the time. Mr. Speaker, she questions what's in the review, the refreshed review in 2021 and 2023. Let me be clear. The then Foreign Secretary, sitting, I think, over here, the Honourable Member for Braintree, 1 month after the arrest, so absolutely the relevant time, gave a speech at Mansion House. It was called Our Position on China, setting out the government's policy. He said in that speech, summing up China as a threat in one word would be, his words, impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. Foreign Secretary, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just him. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition was Business Secretary at the time. In September 23, the Leader of the Opposition said, her words, September 23, the relevant year, her words, we should certainly not be describing China as a foe. It's worth looking up the word foe in the dictionary, Mr. Speaker. She went, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't end there, Mr. Speaker. In September 2024, the Leader of the Opposition said this, I quote, I have shied away from calling China a threat. She is playing politics with national security.
The Prime Minister can read the beginning of a quote. Let me finish that quote. At the end of that quote that he just read out, I did describe China as a threat. But this whataboutery that he is doing neglects the fact that those spies were charged under a Conservative government. They were let off under Labour. He has not answered any questions. On Monday, Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the Security Minister repeatedly told the House that ministers did not take decisions, that it was the Deputy National Security Advisor who had full freedom. Is the government seriously saying that only one man, the Deputy National Security Advisor, had anything to do with this failure? Is he seriously saying that the Deputy did not discuss with the National Security Advisor, did not discuss with the Home Secretary or with anyone in Downing Street? Is the Prime Minister seriously saying that?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, let me explain why. Firstly, the case was charged under the last government according to the evidence submitted under the last government, which set out their policy decision. What was an issue in the trial is not the position of the current government, the position of the last government. And they carefully avoided describing China as an enemy because that was their policy at the time. Mr. Speaker, so far as the position under this government is concerned, no minister or special advisor was involved, and I will double-check this because I've had it. I will double-check this. So, Mr. Speaker, this is important. After the charging decision, the prosecution were very careful about who would then see the witness evidence. I will double-check, Mr. Speaker, exactly what instruction was taken. But my answer, I can be absolutely clear: no minister was involved. No special advisor was involved in this, and I'm assured as I can be that the prosecution was saying that it would be the witnesses only that were involved in short updates to the evidence that was submitted under the last government.
That's not good enough. Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the end of the answer was different from the beginning of the answer. What on earth is the point of us having a lawyer rather than a leader as the Prime Minister if he can't even get the law right on a matter of national security? He keeps going to the CPS. The CPS have said that they are satisfied that they were right to charge in August 2024. The Sunday Times reported that Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's national security advisor, convened a secret meeting to discuss the security consequences of the China spy trial. Did the meeting happen, or is the Sunday Times making it up?
Mr. Speaker, she's clearly not a lawyer or a leader. Mr. Speaker. The problem for her is I do actually understand the law. I know what's got to be proven. I've also looked at the evidence. Which was put in under the last government in relation to this case. There was a meeting in September. That did not involve the National Security Advisor discussing the evidence in any way, nor, Mr. Speaker, one further piece of evidence. The final statement in this case was submitted in August 2025. There was no further submission of evidence, one way or the other, after any discussion in September. This is a red herring, a completely scurrilous allegation made by the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has now twice directly contradicted the words of his Security Minister. They cannot both be right. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee couldn't get any answers from the Security Minister. The CPS said that they were satisfied that the decision to charge the case in April 2024, not August, in April 2024, was correct on the basis of where the law stood at that time. This is a matter of fact. It is not a matter of what the previous government had thought. It is not a matter of it not meeting a legal test. It did. Something must have changed when the charges were brought and when the case collapsed. The charges were brought under us. The case collapsed under them. Can the Prime Minister tell us what changed and what collapsed the case?
Mr. Speaker, I've said I will publish the witness statements in full. The whole House will then see exactly what was set out in 2023 in the substantive witness statement and exactly what was set out in the two supplementary witness statements, and she will then realise what she's just said is entirely baseless.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the CPS has said in the clearest terms that this prosecution was dropped because this government did not provide the statement they expected. Why should we believe a man who at the last Prime Minister's questions said he had full confidence in the best friend of a convicted paedophile? Forgive us if we don't trust a word he says. This all stinks of a cover-up. Given his statement earlier, will the Prime Minister publish today not just the government witness statements, but also the meeting minutes and all of the correspondence that he had with the CPS?
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. The only process I want to go through is in relation to some of the individuals in the statements to make sure they know it's coming out. I can assure the House there's no substantive delay here. I know it is of concern to a number of people, acute of concern to them. I will have the statements out in full. There is a bit of proper process I need to go through. The honourable member will understand why that's necessary. Then they'll be published in full. She asks about minutes, etc. There is a usual rules and process for government. But I remind her that the substantive issues in this case were discussed at meetings under the previous government. So they're asking me to disclose the discussions that they had in relation to the witness statement in the first place.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, you deserve better, and this House deserves better than the evasive answers that we have had from the Prime Minister. Even the former Cabinet Secretary, Lord Butler, has accused the government of being economical with the truth on this issue. The Prime Minister can't tell us why Jonathan Powell had a secret meeting, which the Security Minister said he had no involvement in the case. He can't tell us why his government did not provide evidence that China was a threat. I suspect those statements won't prove it either. He's blaming his civil servants. He's blaming the media. He's blaming the last government. He cannot explain why he could not see this case through. He should have seen this case through. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, about what has happened. A serious case involving national security has collapsed because this government is too weak to stand up to China. And if the Prime Minister cannot protect the members of this House, what does that say about his ability to protect this country?
The case did not proceed because the policy of the past government did not meet the test that was necessary. That is the long and the short of it. Far from evading, I have said I will disclose the full witness statements that set out exactly what was in the witness statements, exactly what the subsequent statement says, and the allegation that somehow they were changed, that the first statement and the second statements are different, is completely and utterly unfounded. Mr. Speaker, it's a pathetic spectacle. Instead of taking responsibility for the fact they failed to update the law so this case could actually be the review, Mr. Speaker. 2015 was the review into the legislation. They took 8 years to change the law. Had they done that more quickly, this case would have proceeded. It was their failure, and they're just slinging mud. Meanwhile, we're getting on, Mr. Speaker, with renewing our country, new planning reforms, get rid of building, online hospitals for waiting lists, new opportunities for young people. Labour's building a better future. They can't even come to terms with their past.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Derby is a city on the up, but unfortunately this last year we've been devastated by knife crime. Nasty Tory austerity decimated frontline policing, and we're now paying the price for that. At my regular city centre safety summits, the message is clear: to turn the page, we need action and not words. Can the Prime Minister update my constituents on what action this government is taking to make sure all our residents, our visitors and our workers can enjoy our city centre safely?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank him for his question. As he will have heard at our conference, we had Pooja Kanda there, who I've met a number of times. Her son Ronan was fatally stabbed, and I'm proud that we've delivered, Mr. Speaker, Ronan's law to tackle the sale of ninja swords, and we've also banned zombie knives and strengthened controls for online knife sales. I pay tribute to his work setting up the City Safety Summits.
Daisy Cooper, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I associate myself and my party with the tributes to David Amess? And on behalf of my party, can I also pay tribute to Ming Campbell, who is being laid to rest today? That is the reason why my right honourable friend, the member for Kingston and Surbiton, cannot be here. And I'd like to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the Prime Minister and other members of this House for their very kind tributes yesterday. We welcome the new level of transparency from the Prime Minister, and we will scrutinise those witness statements closely, but it is clear there are still many questions to be answered, including questions from Hong Kongers, Mr. Speaker, because Hong Kongers in St Albans and across the UK have settled in our communities after they have fled repression at the hands of the Chinese state. But now they see a British government that wants to make it harder for Hong Kongers to settle here permanently, that refuses to impose targeted sanctions on Chinese officials who put bounties on Hong Kongers' heads, that is refusing to rule out a Chinese super embassy and is failing to tackle Chinese espionage. Mr. Speaker, Hong Kongers are starting to ask whether the Prime Minister is trading away their security and safety in our communities for a cosier relationship with Beijing. What is the Prime Minister's answer to them?
The answer is no, and we have given and will continue to give support to Hong Kongers who need and deserve that support, and she will be assured that the Jimmy Lai case is raised regularly at every opportunity by my ministers and indeed by me.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that Hong Kongers will require a lot more reassurance and action from this government. But it is not just the Chinese government that is a threat to our country. On Monday, the far-right, racist hate preacher Tommy Robinson, who is currently on trial for allegedly refusing to comply with counter-terror police, claimed that his legal costs are being paid by Elon Musk. It is outrageous that a man who has so much control over what people read online every day could be funding someone who stokes far-right extremism on our streets. If this was Putin, the government surely would act. So will the Prime Minister commission the security services to assess the threat that Elon Musk poses to our democracy and recommend measures to this House that we can take to stop it?
Well, I can tell her we do look across the board at threats to our democracy and must continue to do so. I won't comment on the particular case given the state of legal proceedings.
Alex Backham.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Next year marks the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Imjin River, where the 29th Infantry Brigade's last stand prevented the capture of Seoul during the Korea War. That hill is now called Gloucester Hill, as a proud testament to the incredible bravery of one of those battalions, our glorious Gloucesters. Will the Prime Minister join with me in calling for a commemoration for the glorious Gloucesters and all those who fought to defend democracy, liberty and freedom in South Korea?
Well, I join my honourable friend in marking the heroism and sacrifice of the 29th Infantry Brigade, an enduring example, Mr Speaker, of the bravery of all our armed forces. I know Defence Ministers would be happy to discuss commemorating their courage. Our debt to armed forces undermines our commitment to veterans, including delivering homes for heroes, a new network of veteran support centres backed with £50 million.
Liz Saville Roberts.
Ahead of his party conference, the Prime Minister told the BBC he wasn't sure whether he'd campaign in Caerphilly for the by-election on the 23rd of October. This is an important by-election in Wales. Well, there's just over a week to go and he hasn't shown his face there yet. So what's the problem, Mr Speaker? Is it his party decision to close 10 libraries in the community? Cuts to disability support? Or perhaps it's the fact that even the council leader resigned from the Labour Party and is calling on people to support Plaid Cymru?
Well, Mr Speaker, she leaves out of account that we provided £21 billion, the largest ever settlement for Wales. And what did she do? What did she do? She voted against it, if you can believe it. I noticed, whilst we're on the question of money, she's accepted figures this week showing independence would cost every Welsh person £7,000. They should be honest about the cost to the people of Wales of their policies.
Lord Hampton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. For the past year, I've been campaigning for a new SEND school to open at the Osprey Quayside on Portland. As it stands, there are far too few specialist school places for children with SEND in my part of the world, so local families urgently need to see this school open its doors. A new school here would provide around 70 new places for local children. So given the urgent need to get this school finally up and running, will the Prime Minister commit to working with the Department for Education and Dorset Council to ensure that a SEND school opens on Portland without further delay?
I thank my honourable friend, and I know just how important this school is to parents and children in his constituency, and share his determination to fix the broken SEND system. That's why we've boosted investment in SEND to £12 billion, Mr Speaker, to put new facilities and tailored support in place for children who've been long failed. We want decisions taken swiftly, and I'll ask the Schools Minister to update him in relation to the particular school.
Sir Julian Smith.
Speaker, family farms in North Yorkshire and across the UK are increasingly worried about the tax changes coming up next year. We really need the next generation of these family farms to keep farming for our national food security. Sentax has produced an excellent detailed academic report proposing a number of compromise amendments and changes that would both deliver to the government and protect the family farm. I realise he cannot comment about the budget, but could I ask him and the Chancellor to look at this report as they prepare for the end of November budget?
I agree with him that food security is national security. I do believe our reforms strike the right balance and enable investment in public services to rural communities that they rely on. I do thank him for drawing my attention to the report. He's right to do so. What really matters is increasing the year-on-year profitability of our farmers, and that's why the former president of the NFU is leading a review for us on farm profitability. We're also delivering, Mr Speaker, a 25-year farming roadmap, boosting export opportunities through the EU and US trade deals, backed by £11.8 billion in the budget for farming.
Ben Goldsborough.
Mr Speaker, as many honourable members know, I am currently being treated for stage 2C skin cancer. I'm responding well, but only because it was caught early and because I've had the very best of NHS care. Not everyone is so fortunate. Zoe Panayi, a 26-year-old from the Isle of Wight, was told her mole was harmless. She had it removed privately, but proved to be malignant. She tragically died in 2020. Her family, Charlie and Eileen in the gallery today, have shown extraordinary courage, working with my honourable friend, the member for the Isle of Wight West, and me to campaign for Zoe's law, compulsory testing of all moles to be removed. Will the Prime Minister meet with us and Zoe's family to discuss how we can make this a reality?
Well, on behalf of the House, can I wish my honourable friend the very best for his recovery. I know this is a deeply personal campaign for him, a campaign that's also supported by my honourable friend for the Isle of Wight West. Can I send my deepest sympathies and pay tribute to Zoe's family who are with us today. Their bravery is staggering, and I share their determination to improve cancer survival rates. That's why we're investing billions to see earlier diagnosis, faster treatment of cancer, and developing a national cancer plan. In relation to a meeting, yes, of course, we will get that set up. And if the family are available and it's convenient, and I don't know whether it is, I will ask the Health Minister to meet them later on today, or at the earliest opportunity if that's not convenient, so they can have that discussion.
Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Business confidence has fallen for 5 consecutive quarters, and Reeves has said there is significant concerns in the housing market. Now, the Prime Minister could inject some confidence back into the economy. He could help working families get onto the housing ladder, and he could even simplify the tax affairs for his cabinet if he adopted the policy advocated by the Leader of the Opposition in scrapping stamp duty on residential properties. Now, will the Prime Minister at least commit that he won't be raising property taxes in his nightmare before Christmas budget?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're certainly not going to be following the Leader of the Opposition. She unveiled what she called her golden economic rule, I think it was. That involves, on the one hand, £47 billion of spending cuts. That's a fifth of the NHS budget, with not a shred of detail about where the money would come from. The Institute for Government said it was on shaky foundations. More unfunded tax cut, more austerity for public services. They haven't listened and they haven't learned.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Between 2021 and 2023, 41 mental health patients in the care of Teessask and Weir Valley NHS Trust lost their lives, leading to a damning report by NHS England and calls from my constituents for a public inquiry. And it's not just historic. My surgeries are still filled with harrowing stories of failure. Will the Prime Minister join my calls, therefore, for a public inquiry to get to the bottom of what went wrong and to rebuild confidence with new, more appropriately sized local NHS mental health trusts which are fit to serve our constituents?
Well, my honourable friend has been a strong advocate for his constituents on this issue. The Health Secretary has met the families affected by these failures twice, I think, this year to hear their stories. And I want to be clear that what happened to the loved ones is unacceptable. The Health Secretary is currently considering the best way forward, so the families will get the answers that they deserve. It's right that they receive any update first, but I can assure him that we'll provide that update just as soon as we're able to do so.
Becca Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Later on this afternoon, I'm going to be launching a small business survey so that the 3,000 SMEs in my constituency who employ thousands of my constituents can have their say about what it's like to run a business under a Labour government and what their concerns are ahead of the budget. However, Mr. Speaker, I want to give the right honourable gentleman the opportunity for me to share a word of hope from him ahead of the budget. So will he tell my constituents that he has heard the pleas of SMEs and their frightenedness about the budget, and that he will scrap business rates for hospitality and leisure, that he will scrap the family business and family farm tax, and that his government will commit to no further tax rises for business?
Mr. Speaker, just a few months ago we published our small business strategy. That was based on what small businesses take to it. I'll make a copy available to her so she can give one to every member of her constituency before they fill in the survey.
Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is renewing Britain's, and for the benefit of the Leader of the Opposition, that's BRITAI. This government is renewing Britain's infrastructure after 14 years of neglect.
And nowhere is this more clearly needed than in the A226 Galley Hill Road in Swanscombe in my constituency, which collapsed more than 2 years ago with no fix in sight. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that the announcement of the Transport Structures Fund in the spending review shows that under this government we're ending the Conservative decline and getting on with fixing broken roads like Galley Hill?
Well, he's right. The party opposite let roads crumble after years of uninvestment. We're building infrastructure that working people rely on. Mr. Speaker, that's £1 billion to repair bridges, tunnels and flyovers across the country and £92 billion in major road and rail upgrades. Mr. Speaker, we're rebuilding Britain. They can't even spell it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Much like the honourable member for Bishop Auckland, my constituents are served by Tuve Mental Health Trust. They face travelling to York or Middlesbrough for local inpatient beds, with some people being sent as far afield as Glasgow or Southampton. This is completely unacceptable and we need a provision of local mental health inpatient beds. I welcome the openness to an inquiry into Tuve, but my concerns would still be that whilst that's going on, we need real action now so that the continued failings don't see the loss of any other lives. So what steps will the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State take now to reassure and rebuild trust in Tuve?
Well, I thank him for his question, and he will have heard my response to my honourable friend a moment ago. And can I say again that what happened to his constituents is unacceptable, and we'll give the answer as soon as we can. In the meantime, he asks what is happening, and we are getting on with recruiting 6,700 additional NHS mental health staff. We're building 85 new dedicated mental health emergency departments, and we've boosted NHS spending on mental health by almost £700 million.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for his strong words at our party conference, calling for unity at a time when many feel our country is divided and rightly calling out racism. As a second-generation immigrant born in this country, people like me and so many of our constituents have every right to be here. No one should face hatred because of the colour of their skin. Does the Prime Minister agree that some of those on the benches opposite who seek to stoke division and keep close company with those who accept Russian bribes cannot and should not be trusted to govern this country?
Mr. Speaker, she captures the choice between us as a country. Either we can give in to division or come together as a country and renew our country. This is Hate Crime Awareness Week. And in the past fortnight, we've seen the horrific terror atrocity in Manchester and a despicable arson attack on the mosque in Peacehaven. I want to be clear as Prime Minister. I am proud to lead and to serve this beautiful, tolerant and diverse country. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Susan Murray.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Calithia Studios in Mid Dumbartonshire is a prime example of a business doing everything the government asks. The owner of this beauty salon and her 3 employees each earn less than £30,000 a year. Yet the business will pay the government over £36,000 for the year in VAT, employers' national insurance and pension contributions. Does the Prime Minister think it's fair the hard-working owner who is providing jobs and training on the high street contributes more to the exchequer than she earns in a year? And does he believe this encourages entrepreneurship, which is important for economic growth and local jobs?
Speaker, as you will know, we protected business rates bills from inflation, extended relief at 40% with new permanent lower rates set on and introduced for retail, hospitality and leisure. And as part of our small business plan, we're providing £3 billion so that lenders can offer more loans to small businesses. We're of course introducing the most significant package on late payments, a real issue for small businesses, and reforms that are bigger than anything in the last 25 years.
Whitby. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister update the House on the government's elections bill? And does he agree that in light of recent court cases and the conviction of Reform's former leader in Wales, that no party whose leaders take Russian bribes can be trusted to defend our democracy?
Mr. Speaker, Labour is introducing an elections bill to protect our democracy from foreign interference. But look at Reform. the member for Clacton and his deputy worked alongside someone who took money to spread Putin's propaganda. Whatever their denials, they have serious questions to answer about what they knew. But that is the choice. Kremlin cronies sowing division or Labour patriots working for national renewal.
John Turgendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The lines that we've heard from the government in recent days have been a conflation of fabricated stories, trying to set up straw men and knock down things that have not been said. Yes. The real question in this whole debate is whether or not the DPP charged legally and properly. If they did, then the OSA is valid, and all this talk about the National Security Act that I introduced is completely irrelevant. If they did not, why is he not charging his successor with abuse of power? Well, we know the reality, Mr. Speaker, because although he has answered the question about evidence, the real question is what political direction did this government give to their officials before they went to give evidence?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. And I will also tell him this. I was the chief prosecutor for 5 years. And I can say, in that 5 years, which included 3 years under the coalition government, when we were taking difficult decisions on MPs' expenses, not once was I subjected to political pressure of any sort from anyone. That is the tradition in this country. It's a proud tradition. It's one I uphold as Prime Minister, just as I upheld it when I was Director of Public Prosecution.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, James Clough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, in the statement that the Security Minister made earlier this week, and then again in answer to a question, I have been misquoted, and the misquote, I think, is significant. It has been said that I, in a speech at Mansion House, said that describing China as a threat was impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. The quote was that describing China as one word, or our policy in one word, is impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. And, Mr. Speaker, in that speech, I went on to say that our policy first, we will strengthen our national security protections wherever Beijing's actions pose a threat to our people or prosperity. And I finished by saying, and when there are tensions with other objectives, we will always put our national security first. How can I get redress for this misquote, Mr. Speaker?
Do you want to come back? No. What I want to say is, look, you put it on the record. It is there now for all to see. I will now leave it at that stage. That completes premises.
Out the chamber swiftly. We have an urgent question shortly. Ed Morello.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To ask the Minister whether he will make a statement on the adequacy of Jehoots as a pharmacy provider.
Minister Stevington.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for West Dorset for securing this important urgent question. Pharmacies play a vital role in our healthcare system. They are at the heart of our high streets and the cornerstone of communities up and down the country. That's why this government has given pharmacies a funding boost of almost £500 million this year, more than any other area of the NHS, and the biggest uplift in years. Indeed, we've provided a 19% uplift over the 2-year period. The vast majority of pharmacies provide excellent care to their patients, but unfortunately there are some that fall short of the standards that we expect. And sadly, the services provided by JUTs are falling well below the mark. Honourable members will know that several integrated care boards have been deploying contract management actions against JUTs, initially in the form of breach notices. Integrated care boards enforce the NHS terms of service on pharmacies for things like their opening hours, and the General Pharmaceutical Council regulates pharmacy premises and pharmacy professionals. Both integrated care boards and the General Pharmaceutical Council have powers to address problems in pharmacies, and they are actively using those powers, including in relation to stores that are part of JUTs. I have written to the Honourable Gentleman about this case, and as he will understand, it is difficult for me to go into the specific details about one specific pharmacy chain, at least in terms of the specifics of the measures that we're taking. But what I can tell him is that where there are problems with access to medicines, integrated care boards are supporting affected patients in the short term. For example, by allowing local dispensing doctors to provide dispensing services to affected patients. Where pharmacy stores regularly breach their terms of service, integrated care boards can give them notice that they are being removed from the pharmaceutical list. This power applies to any and all pharmacies, including JUTs, of course. This means they will no longer be able to provide NHS services. Such notices can be appealed, so it does take some time to work through the system. I'd like to stress to honourable members that pharmacies are private businesses and must be responsible business owners. Whilst we can regulate what pharmacies should and should not do as part of their NHS terms of service, it is not possible to prevent pharmacies from, for example, not paying their staff. In conclusion, if pharmacies breach their terms of service, for example by not being open when they should be, or where there are patient safety concerns, we take action. The General Pharmaceutical Council is taking regulatory action. Integrated care boards are taking regulatory action and are supporting patients with access to medicines where necessary. This is aimed at improving the pharmacy's behaviour, but can ultimately lead to pharmacies being forced to close their business. I have also asked my officials to explore whether we can strengthen the regulatory framework to be able to deal more quickly with pharmacies that do not play by the rules, and my officials are working on this as a matter of urgency. My office is setting up a meeting as well with the Honourable Gentleman to discuss this further, and I will keep the House updated in the usual way. Thank you.
Edward Moreno.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd be grateful if you could pass my thanks to the Speaker for granting this urgent question. I thank the Minister for his response. The collapse of service provision in some places, the constant closure in others, and general governance at JUT's Pharmacy, which operates 150 branches across England, does demand immediate ministerial intervention. In West Dorset, JUT's branches in Lyme Regis and Bridport have closed for months, leaving thousands without access to essential medication and placing huge strain on overstretched neighbouring pharmacies. JUT's staff have gone months without pay, despite pay slips being issued, tax deductions made and pension contributions not deposited. I've been contacted only this morning by staff who have not been paid for the 3rd month. Many are unable to buy food, pay rent, and are relying on food banks and the amazing communities that have stepped up to support them. There have been reports of staff recruited by JUTs under skilled workers visas being left without income or resource. I've also been made aware of deeply troubling reports of controlled drugs being removed without proper documentation or process, which, if proven true, may constitute a breach of the Misuse of Drugs Act. I've raised my concerns with the General Pharmaceutical Council, HMRC, NHSBA, the ICB and Minister Kinnock, who I thank for his response. And while I understand that processes must be followed, this situation requires immediate action. JUT staff are not being paid. People across the country do not have access to vital medicine. Can the Minister please confirm what steps are being taken to ensure that all JUT staff are paid without delay? What discussions have taken place with the NHSBA, the General Pharmaceutical Council and other regulators about Jehoot's business practices? And finally, will the government commit to urgently reviewing Jehoot's suitability as an NHS pharmacy provider, outline what safeguards will be introduced to prevent this from happening again, and review the pharmacy funding model?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his words, and I agree with absolutely everything he's just said. It is completely and utterly unacceptable if a business such as Jehoot's is not paying its staff. If indeed there are these reports that controlled drugs are not being handled properly, I would strongly recommend that any mishandling of drugs be reported to the General Pharmaceutical Council, who regulate pharmacy professionals and premises, so that appropriate action can be taken. Regarding his question on paying staff, pharmacy staff are vitally important parts of our NHS in terms of the NHS part of what pharmacy does. They provide vital services to our communities and should be paid according to their contracts. Any failure to do so is completely unacceptable. Of course, pharmacy staff are not employed by the NHS, but by those businesses that they work for. Therefore, any dispute between staff and a pharmacy business should be raised with the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service, ACAS. But I am also in touch with the PDA, the Pharmacy Defence Association, and I know they're doing important work in terms of representing their members, and I will be meeting soon with them as well. But we have, of course, responsibility for the NHS part of the work, but it is up to individual businesses to ensure that their employees are treated fairly. In terms of the review of suitability to operate, as he rightly points out, we are looking at this now across the board in terms of what is the role of the General Pharmaceutical Council, what role is what's taking place in terms of ICBs taking contract action, where there is no sign of improvement and the pharmacies continue to be in breach. The next escalation for that is that they be struck off the pharmaceutical register. That takes some time because certain pharmacies, I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure the honourable gentleman can imagine who, are trying every single thing they can to appeal, to push back, to stop some of the actions that we're seeking to take. That is elongating the time that this all takes. But I want to be clear that if there is clear breach and that action is not taken to remedy that breach, then pharmacies will be struck off the pharmaceutical register.
Very own pharmacist, Shadiq Al-Hassan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and as a pharmacist for nearly 20 years and MP of North Somerset, I have the dubious pleasure of having 2 Jehoot's pharmacies in the town of Portishead in my constituency. Now, I can't say operating because they shuttered their doors, with reports of them not having paid their bills, not having paid their rent, not having paid their staff. Now, as a pharmacist, I know that this affects the perception and view of community pharmacy up and down the country. Can I ask the Minister what efforts he and the department are planning to mean that bad actors in the pharmacy space, such as, in my opinion, Jehoot's seem to be obviously one, are going to be dealt with more quickly and more effectively under new legislation?
It should not be statements. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my honourable friend, and I pay tribute to his direct professional expertise and experience as a pharmacist. He is right to point to the fact that the regulatory framework is clearly not as strong as it needs to be. The behaviour, I've spoken with officials in my department who've worked in the pharmacy sector for many, many years. They haven't seen anything like this before. It is quite unprecedented, but nevertheless, I think what it is doing is shining a light on the fact that we don't have a strong enough regulatory framework. We need to look at the way that business owners are regulated. There is strong regulation in terms of pharmacists and pharmacy staff, technicians, etc., but business owners are not being regulated as strongly as they could and should be. He's right that speed is also very important. That's why we need to look at ways of fast-tracking particular cases where there is clear breach because sometimes the appeal process can be very slow indeed. We are looking at all of this in the round, and I have commissioned urgent advice from my officials to see how we can beef up the regulatory framework.
Shadow Minister Dr. Luke Evans.
The National Pharmacy Association Chief Executive Henry Gregg only this weekend said he's concerned that reports of Jehoot's pharmacy branches across England failing patients risks damaging community pharmacy's reputation and could imperil its ability to secure a good 2026-27 funding settlement. Across the country, communities have been left without functioning pharmacies. Doors locked without notice, patients arriving to find no pharmacist, no prescriptions, no stock. Staff unpaid, staff threatened with being sacked. Jehoot's pharmacy faces allegations of not paying wages, repossessed premises, and serious regulatory breaches. The General Pharmaceutical Council has already intervened several times, yet for many patients, it's too late. They simply can't get their medicines. This is not an isolated business failure. It exposes a deeper fragility in the community pharmacy network, one that local people depend on for basics and often life-saving care. So I have four questions for the Minister. Number one, when was the NHS England first made aware of these closures? And has the Minister met with the Jehoot's leadership? If not, why not? And if he did, what was the outcome? Number two, has the department assessed how many people have been left without local pharmacy access as the result of Jehoot's actions? And what is the Minister doing to remedy this, considering it's across the country? He mentioned ICBs, but there are several involved. Number three, what mechanisms exist to ensure continuity of care when a contractor collapses or walks away? Again, he mentioned ICBs, but is there a national contingency plan? And finally, will the government now review whether the current model, with chains and expanding rapidly through acquisition and debt, is fit to safeguard community pharmacy in the long term? And linked to this, can the Minister definitively confirm the funding settlement is not compromised? The 10-year NHS plan states it wants to move more care into the community, yet it's completely missing a delivery chapter on how to achieve it. At the same time, we have issues like Jehoot's. So I hope the Minister will be taking steps to investigate this issue in its entirety, taking actions to safeguard against the type of incident happening again, and spelling out the delivery aspect of the 10-year plan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Shadow Minister for his questions. In terms of first awareness of what was happening with Jehoot's, he will know that they entered the market through the purchase of a number of Lloyd's pharmacies that were no longer a going concern, and that took place in 2023. So in terms of the question about the due diligence on Jehoot's as an operator, that's probably a question he should be asking one of my predecessors from his party that were in power at the time. Since they purchased, they have expanded rapidly, and that has been where we've seen then the question marks around their ability to operate and serious downgrading of services. I have not met with the management of Jehoot's. We are looking at a whole range of legal and regulatory enforcement procedures, and the decision we have therefore taken is that it is better not to interfere in any way in those processes, but I am certainly monitoring that very closely, and if we have legal advice that suggests such a meeting would be a good idea, then I'm of course open to that idea, but the current legal position, the advice we've received is that it would not be appropriate at this time. In terms of local pharmacy access, integrated care boards are of course have a statutory responsibility to ensure adequate pharmacy provision. So some ICBs, for example, have allowed dispensing GP practices to provide dispensing services to affected patients, whilst others have worked with local GP practices to advise patients to nominate alternative nearby pharmacies for their prescriptions. We've looked at the impact geographically in terms of where Jehoot's is placed, and in most cases our view is that there is an alternative pharmacy provision within striking distance, but there are I think 4 or 5 areas of the country where that's not the case, including the honourable gentleman who secured this urgent question in his constituency. I'm very conscious of that, and then extra provision needs to be made through the ICBs and through GPs to ensure, perhaps it might be through distance selling or other means, to ensure that patients are getting access to their pharmaceutical needs. He asks about continuity of care and national contingency. This is a very challenging situation because, as I mentioned in my remarks, and as officials have said, we haven't seen this level of decline in service so rapidly, and so we are working at pace to strengthen the regulatory framework and looking at contingency plans. I don't see any reason why the overall funding settlement for pharmacy should be undermined, and we will continue to protect community pharmacy as a crucially important part of our NHS.
Select Committee Member Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank the Minister for his response. The role of community pharmacies, like a pharmacy in my area called Lodge Pharmacy in Perry Common, is absolutely vital. And this is why, but also I'd like to, I've lost track, but community pharmacies offer an excellent service, and this is why I'm concerned with places like Jute Pharmacy closing and folding, or maybe folding. The question I'd like to ask, coming up to the winter months, I have been passionate about winter measures. How are we going to ensure that our pharmacies are going to be able to offer the winter vaccines that are needed this year if we lose large chains like Duke's Pharmacy? Sorry about that.
Right, Minister.
I thank my honourable friend and pay tribute to her work on the Select Committee. NHS England is assessing the situation and preparing contingency plans in case Jutes does become insolvent. Such plans involve working with other local pharmacies and dispensing GP practices to ensure that patients continue to have access to medicines. Continuity of care, as she rightly points out, has to be at the heart of our response to this, and we are working at pace to ensure that continuity of care is protected.
Select Committee, forgive me, Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first thank my honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, for raising this appalling issue. Pharmacies are at the heart of our communities, and they are relied upon by millions, and they're under increasing pressure right across the country, where we're seeing irregular opening hours and unforecast closures. Families living in communities that rely on Jehoots pharmacies, like those in the constituency of my honourable friend, and many other parts of the country, will be deeply concerned that they and their loved ones are about to be left without medicines potentially that they desperately need, while their staff have been placed in an intolerable situation. The National Pharmacy Association Chief Executive has said, as we've heard, that Jehoots risks damaging the reputation of community pharmacies. The government urgently needs to grip this issue and ensure that patients and the staff of these pharmacies are not being let down. So will the Minister and the Secretary of State agree to meet with all the members in this place whose communities are being affected by potential closures? Will he update the House at the earliest opportunity as to what steps he's taking to stabilise the crisis in community pharmacy across the country? And is he confident that ICBs, who are distracted by 50% cuts to their budgets, a top-down reorganisation, that they have the capacity to deal with this urgent situation as they head into planning for the next winter crisis?
I thank her for those questions. I would certainly be happy to meet with honourable members who have Jutes in their constituency and are affected by this. I will absolutely update the House. We are taking action on looking at strengthening the regulation, but there is also some constraints on what I can say, because so much of this is now going through legal process. As I say, there is pushback. We don't want to do anything to jeopardise the legal action that we are taking through the appeal process. So I'll have to be relatively circumspect in what I say, but I'm happy to have those discussions and to update the House. I am confident that ICBs can take this forward. As I said, in most cases across the country, based on our assessment, there is a pharmacy within striking distance of a Jute. But certainly in those areas where there isn't, that may require particular follow-up action, and my officials and I will be following up with those ICBs to ensure that the appropriate action is being taken.
Melanie On.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. 5 members of Jehoot staff have been to see me from the Laceby Road pharmacy. They've been going into work but haven't been paid since July. It is absolutely appalling. Can the Minister set out what pressure he and the department can bring to bear on this chain, which has now, unfortunately, closed its doors for good?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I agree with absolutely every word of what she's just said. It is completely unacceptable that people are coming into work, doing an honest day's work, and not receiving an honest day's pay for that work. Unfortunately, there's a limit to what we can do because pharmacies are private businesses and each employer is required to fulfil their legal obligations in terms of paying their staff. I would recommend that the members of staff that she mentions contact ACAS, and they should also, if they're not already in touch with the PDA, their trade union, if they are members of that union, I would strongly recommend that joining a trade union and seeking legal advice from a trade union is a vitally important part of what trade unions do. They need to take action on this and to force Jutes to do the right thing.
Simon Hall.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank my friend and neighbour for West Dorset for introducing this urgent question. I have exactly the same problem as he and the Honourable Member for North Somerset, but in Shaftesbury, in my constituency. I want to thank the staff of Boots who are picking up such a huge amount of slack because the Jehoots isn't there. There's a danger to the one member of staff who is on duty because there are prescribed drugs on the premises and she's the only person there, and I do worry for her safety. I wonder what additional support the department can give to those existing providers like Boots who are picking up the slack, particularly during the winter peak with regards to advice to patients and also administering vaccines. This is a clear breach of contract, but I'm told by our ICB it doesn't fall within contract law. The regulations are mute on this point because the circumstances that Jehoots find itself in was never envisaged when the regulations were written. That's the problem which the Minister has identified. There does seem to be some timidity amongst officials and others with regards to the overhanging threat of a judicial review were the government to act in extremis to introduce some urgency to it. I would urge the Minister to take that risk on behalf of all of our constituents, and I certainly welcome and look forward to his offer to the suggestion of the Honourable Lady for North Shropshire that all members of Parliament with constituents affected by this dire problem will be involved in meetings so that we can provide timely advice and update and support to our constituents who are of course rightly worried.
Minister.
I thank him for his question, and I pay tribute to the employees in the Boots, which is close by the Jutes, that is not providing the service that's required, and we really do appreciate that. I can assure him that absolutely nothing is off the table. He has rightly identified the problem, which is that the regulatory framework is strong on pharmacists, strong on pharmacist premises, strong on pharmacy staff, but it seems that there is something of a gap when it comes to regulating pharmacy business owners. That is a gap that has been identified. I have asked I've commissioned my officials to work on that at pace, and I would happily keep him updated on that work.
Noshaba Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for the context he's provided and the responses he has provided so far. Jutes in my constituency of Gillingham and Rainham have provided an incredibly poor service, not paying staff, not dispensing vital medicine, and often not opening on time. However, any replacement pharmacy or provider is not able to come in because at the moment the pharmaceutical needs assessment locally suggests that the provision is functioning. Will the Minister consider a review of the criteria surrounding P&As so that not only do they list those pharmacies that are available, but also look at failures such as the ones that we are seeing with Jutes and are able to recognise that so other providers can take their place if needs be?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and she's also put her finger on an issue within all of this, which is if you're looking to bring in other pharmacies to open up to replace Jutes or indeed to take over a Jute store, you can't do that in the latter case until such time as there is an insolvency and that business is no longer a going concern. And if you want to bring in, there is a process for opening new pharmacies as set out in legislation, potential new pharmacy contractors can apply to open in the area and evidence how a new pharmacy can provide benefits for patients. It is, however, a challenge for new contractors to make such a case if a Jutes pharmacy is still listed as open and providing services in the area. So it's something of a catch-22 situation. We first of all have to resolve the issue with Jutes, take the necessary action, and then we see where we are in terms of potential gaps in the market.
Select Committee Chair Leila Moran.
Deputy Speaker, this case of Jahoots is clearly hugely unfortunate given the incredible work that community pharmacies do up and down the country for our constituents. I'm pleased to hear the Minister say that this case won't negatively affect the funding settlement, but we also know this is in the backdrop of a very precarious sector where actors who want to do good by our communities, who want to do a high-quality job, often find they simply can't make ends meet at the end of the day, and bad actors find a way to move in. When the committee looked last at this, workforce was a key plank to why this sector was not sustainable. What update can the Minister give us on the inclusion of pharmacists in the workforce plan?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady and pay tribute to her work as Chair of the Select Committee. I'm very proud of the fact that we delivered a £500 million uplift to pharmacy, 19% across the two-year period. That is the highest uplift of any sector, not just of my portfolio, but of the entire NHS. I'm also very proud of the fact that we're taking forward hub and spoke legislation to enable pharmacists and pharmacy technicians to operate at the top of their licence. And we have also just the day before yesterday signed off on an SI for improving the ability of technicians on dispensing and to do more in that area as well. So we're looking to empower the workforce, enable them to operate at the top of the licence, and that is a fundamental part of the shift from hospital to community that is at the heart of our 10-year plan.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Jutes Pharmacy moved into the village of Knott End in 2023, and it wasn't long before constituents were getting in touch with me explaining that they couldn't access their prescriptions because the pharmacies were closed and it was very unreliable. However, we do have a very good Overwire Medical Centre which has dispensing rights. However, they are restrained by the 1 mile rule, which means they can't dispense prescriptions within 1 mile of where a pharmacy is, regardless of whether or not it's open or closed. So I feel like we're in a catch-22 situation here. What help can the Minister give my constituents to ensure that those constituents who are within the 1 mile of the Jutes pharmacy that's never open can access their prescriptions from the dispensing Overwire medical practice?
Minister.
I thank her for that question. She has absolutely rightly put her finger on the catch-22 situation in which we find ourselves. It is patently absurd that a pharmacy that isn't operating, as she just described it, the Jutes isn't operating, is blocking the ability of others to step in and fill the gap. That is something we have to resolve. It's part of the work that I've commissioned urgently. We've clearly got gaps in the regulatory framework. This is an unprecedented situation. We're working at pace to address it, but she's absolutely rightly put her finger on the catch-22 that needs to be resolved. We need to move one piece out of the way so that we can deal adequately with this situation.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the way Jahoots is treating its workforce and the community is frankly appalling, suppliers as well, and they're failing communities who desperately rely on them. The government is planning to introduce a health bill at some point in the coming months that will see the abolition of NHS England. Can the Minister update the House on when that bill will come forwards and what provision it will contain within it to strengthen accountability for delivery of community pharmacy provision?
Minister.
I thank him. I know that my colleague, the Minister of State for Health, is working hard on the drafting process for that bill. I can't give him the exact date of its introduction, but I'd be very happy to write to him with confirmation of the expected introduction date.
Jonathan Davies.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased this question has been tabled today because I've written to the Minister about this company, and I'm also very grateful to my honourable friend from North Somerset who's given me advice in this matter. I'm pleased the government is taking regulatory action in respect of the quality, safety and availability of the service, but I was horrified to hear that several of my constituents working for this company have gone unpaid for several weeks. So please could I ask him to reach out to the relevant minister within the Department for Business and Trade just to see if there's anything else that we can do for those people, because it's just simply not right that they're out of pocket.
I thank my honourable friend for that. That's an excellent suggestion. I will do that. If there is clear evidence of breach of employment law, and we're hearing colleague after colleague saying that staff are not being paid, we absolutely need to look at that, and I will follow up on his suggestion.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard again this afternoon the line from the Minister that pharmacy staff are not employed by the NHS but by pharmacy businesses, and this is just a dispute between staff and the pharmacy business that should be raised in the first instance with ACAS. Holly Froggatt from Sidmouth has written to me as a former member of staff from Jehoots. She writes, staff have emailed them begging for their wages as they have empty bank accounts. In normal circumstances, the government likes to lean on pharmacies to take the pressure off GPs with such schemes as Pharmacy First. So how can the Minister simply wash his hands of this situation when staff have gone 3 months without pay?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for that. I don't think that's an accurate characterisation of what I'm saying. I am saying that we are taking action against Jehoots from the regulatory point of view, and there is clearly a very glaring issue around the payment of their staff. That needs to be taken forward through the industrial relations process, both through ACAS and through the PDA. We will absolutely give all the support we can to both of those in terms of ensuring that Jehoots is held to account.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Sedbergh, which is a rural market town, have also suffered greatly from the terrible pharmacy provision from Jehoots. You know, medicines unavailable, often being closed, staff and locum pharmacists going unpaid, yet pay slips being issued, so it's very hard for them to claim benefits. I've written to the Minister, as he knows, I've met with the ICB, and doctors and neighbouring pharmacists, I mean, I say neighbouring, this is Westmoreland, so that's a 40-minute drive away to the neighbouring pharmacists, have stepped in to help, and of course, as has the parish council. So the Minister outlined for me what action he's taking nationally to force Jehoots to provide a better service for my constituents.
Minister.
I thank her for that, and we are actively working with integrated care boards, with NHS England, with the GPC, the General Pharmaceutical Council, and indeed trade unions to ensure that all of these issues are being taken forward and given the urgency that they require. Sadly, as I have pointed out, the regulatory framework is not adequate. It is very focused on pharmacists and pharmacy premises, and inadequately and insufficiently focused on business owners. That is clearly something that must be addressed as a matter of urgency, and we are working on it at pace.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The failure of Jehoots is putting unsustainable pressure on other alternative pharmacies around Kingswinford and South Staffordshire. But talks haven't even begun on pharmacy funding beyond March of next year. So given the urgent situation with Jehoots, will the Minister review the timescale for those talks so that our pharmacies that are having to pick up this extra work can have some certainty about future funding?
Minister.
I thank him for that question. This is absolutely urgent, as he rightly says. I have commissioned officials to work on this matter at pace. We clearly see that this is a matter of national significance, just simply by the number of colleagues in the chamber today talking about this issue. So I can absolutely give him that assurance, and I'd be happy to update him once I've got a better sense of exactly the time frame, the deadlines, and we will be insisting that things happen as a matter of urgency.
James Naish.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I met with the Singh family, which runs 2 pharmacies in my Rushcliffe constituency over recess, and they were clear with me that despite improved funding, they are still struggling with overly complex funding formulas, delayed payments, high energy prices and drug shortages, among other challenges. However, the positive initiatives of Pharmacy First and the Independent Prescribing Pathfinder programme offer a ray of hope. So I wondered if the Minister could commit to continuing to invest time and energy in expanding those programmes and maybe meet with my pharmacies from Rushcliffe to discuss them further.
Minister.
I thank him. We remain absolutely committed to the independent prescribing service, and we are working on the plans and strategy to make that a reality. Pharmacy First, we continue to support. Sadly, take-up on Pharmacy First has not been as good as we would have liked it to be. I think the way in which it was structured and incentivised has not enabled it to realise its full potential, and we are working on that as well. Because I think a number of errors were taken by made by the previous government, which didn't set Pharmacy First up to succeed to the extent that it should have been.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Jute's pharmacies reveal the severe financial strain facing community pharmacies. The towns of Glastonbury and Bruton are home to fantastic independent pharmacies, continuing to serve their communities despite more than half of pharmacy owners losing money last year. So how will the government ensure that the regulatory framework is robust so that community pharmacy services in rural areas can remain resilient and accessible?
Minister.
I thank her, and she's absolutely right. This is about making the regulatory framework more robust. As I've pointed out, it is robust on pharmacists, on technicians, and on pharmacy premises. It is simply not strong enough when it comes to pharmacy business owners, and this unprecedented case of Jutes is throwing that into sharp relief. That is what we are working on at pace, and I'd be very happy to update her once we've got some clear progress on what the plan and strategy is to ensure that we are beefing up the regulatory framework to ensure that this kind of thing can never happen again.
Josh Dean.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I met last week with staff from Jutes Pharmacy in Thorley and was shocked when they told me that they'd been unpaid for months but still working, with some struggling with their mortgages or unable to afford food for their children's school lunches. But their concern was for their residents, many elderly and vulnerable, who've been left without essential medication because of stock issues and unexpected closures. These are good, decent people who want to provide a community service for our residents. So can the Minister assure my constituents directly that the Department will look at all options possible and that they will work across government where relevant to ensure that the situation allowed this to become a problem and to address the specific situation affecting my constituents now will be addressed?
I thank him, and I pay tribute to his constituents who are clearly going through an extremely difficult and challenging time. I would strongly recommend that they contact ACAS and also the PDA or another trade union if they happen to be a member of another trade union. I think the key point he's made is around how we ensure that this doesn't happen again. The GPHC, the General Pharmaceutical Council, is taking enforcement action against individual pharmacies, and we have to wait for the outcome of those actions. Some of those are going through appeal processes. I think as soon as one of those actions has concluded, that will greatly facilitate and catalyse the process for going after any pharmacy that is not delivering to the service standards that we would expect.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Staff and patients at Jahoots Pharmacy in South Walton in North West Norfolk have been let down, going months without pay, no communication from management or stock, and the pharmacist left after non-payment. And when I raised the issues with the company, they simply refused to respond. The Minister has referred to regulatory changes in the future. But given this pattern is repeated across the country, what urgent steps is the Minister taking to work with ICBs collectively to ensure that staff get the money that they're owed, that services that have been commissioned are delivered, and will he not rule out taking action against individual directors?
Minister.
I thank him for that, and as I say, we are in constant dialogue with ICBs, with the GPC, and we need to, I absolutely get it, we need to speed it up. It needs to be faster, needs to be more urgent. I am absolutely clear about that, and we are taking this forward as a matter of priority. In terms of taking action against individual directors, nothing is off the table, but as I say, the regulatory framework as things stand doesn't facilitate that. So we've got to look at other options, but there are views in the GPC which suggest perhaps that there are some ways of looking at interpreting regulations and legislation that could potentially facilitate more immediate action. So that is on the menu of actions that we're looking at.
Steph Ackrow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For almost 2 years now, the people of Sheringham have been suffering from completely unacceptable service from our local branch of Jahoots. Shortages of drugs, shortages of pharmacists, issues with paying staff, and a litany of other issues have caused chaos, including one resident sent by NHS 111 to secure emergency antibiotics, only to find themselves standing in the rain outside a closed pharmacy, fearful they would end up in A&E. Can the Minister tell people in Sheringham and the surrounding villages what protection there'll be for services if Jehoots are no longer seen fit to provide them, how taxpayers' money is being protected from being lost here, but most importantly, how on earth was it allowed to get this bad in the first place?
Minister.
I thank him for that question. In terms of the replacement for Jehoot services, that is where we're in this catch-22 situation, because until they have been moved, a pharmacy that's not providing a service, let's say, has been moved out of the way, it's not possible to move in and replace that service with another. So the first step in all of this is to take action against those pharmacies that are not delivering to requisite service standards. As soon as we can get that process moving, we can start to commission and bring in alternative providers. I share his frustration, I share the impatience of his constituents, and I can assure him that we're taking urgent action on all of these issues.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for strong answers and his to restore confidence as well. Will the Minister acknowledge that pressure on the NHS, especially coming into the winter months, means that pharmacies will be playing a bigger role in providing basic help and advice, and that being unable to rely on a pharmacy cannot be sustained? And can the Minister outline, please, the professional standards that are expected of pharmaceutical chains throughout the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and how these private companies can be held to their public obligations? Thank you.
Minister.
I thank him, and I agree absolutely that the vital role that community pharmacy plays now and going into the future, and we want that role to continue and to be strengthened and indeed expanded. If you look at our 10-year plan, the shift from hospital to community, well, community pharmacy at the heart of that, but also the shift from sickness to prevention, the vital work that community pharmacy plays in terms of delivering vaccines and a whole range of other services that really will support the prevention agenda. So community pharmacy is at the heart of our plan. The standards are as set out by the General Pharmaceutical Council. They are robust standards. It requires a certain level of service to be provided, certain levels of expertise and experience. That is all very robustly regulated. What we clearly now need to do is upgrade the way that we regulate pharmacy business owners, and that is something that my officials and I are working on as a matter of urgency.
That concludes the urgent question on Jehoot's pharmacy. I'll give the front benches a few moments to shuffle over, and we will start our first statement. Statement on Ukraine, Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I'll make a statement on the latest situation in Ukraine, on the recent strikes against Kyiv, on our continuing support for Ukraine and our response to continuing Russian aggression, and on a major new package of sanctions against Russian oil and gas that I am announcing today. And it's a pleasure to be able to do so on a day in which we have welcomed Ruslan Stefanchuk, the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, here to the House of Commons, a sign of our strong and continued friendship. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's also a reflection of the importance of Ukraine's security to this government and to all of us here in the UK that Ukraine is my first statement to the House from the dispatch box as Foreign Secretary, just as Ukraine was my first visit when taking up this role a month ago. And before I start, let me also say thank you and pay tribute to my predecessor in this role, the now Deputy Prime Minister and member for Tottenham, for his work to represent our country on the world stage with great principle and distinction, and who showed such strong and continued leadership in supporting Ukraine. 3.5 years after Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, President Putin has failed in his war aims. He is failing on his military objectives, on the economy, and on his political objectives for both Ukraine and Europe, thanks to the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people and the support and determination of Ukraine's friends. As Ukraine stands firm against Russia, the UK stands firm with Ukraine. Ukraine's security is Europe's security, and the security and stability of the whole of Europe is vital for our security here in the UK. President Zelensky stands ready to hold talks for peace, but President Putin seeks only to escalate war. He will not succeed, because now is the time not just to continue with our steadfast support for Ukraine's defence, but to substantially increase the pressure on Russia's economy and on Putin's war machine. Major new UK sanctions against Russia's biggest oil companies and shadow fleet, new concerted actions with our partners to choke off oil and gas revenues and to hit at the heart of the Putin's economy and war machine, because we are determined to support our Ukrainian friends and to stand up for our own security now. Madam Deputy Speaker, what was clear to me in Kyiv a few weeks ago, and I think it's clear to everyone visiting Ukraine, is the enduring courage and unbreakable spirit of the Ukrainian people. And I saw firsthand the damage from an Iskander missile on Ukraine's Cabinet of Ministers building just 10 days after the British Council offices were also damaged. I met families whose lives had been uprooted, their homes destroyed, and their children's education torn apart. And I met up with 2 teenagers who lived with us in Castleford during the first year of the war and have now returned, and who, despite the drones and the bombardments and the disruption to their lives and their schooling, are continuing to train as international standard ballroom dancers. Because, like Ukrainians across their country, they will not let Russia destroy their dreams. And that is what Vladimir Putin will never understand about the Ukrainian people. For 3.5 years, indeed, since 2014, he has questioned their resilience. For 3.5 years, he has doubted the commitment of their allies, and for 3.5 years, he has been proven wrong. And everywhere I went in Kyiv last month, I saw a nation resolute in its fight. So that despite the huge Russian mobilisation efforts in the last 3 years, Putin remains as far away from achieving those military goals as he has ever been. In this war that Putin started, Russian losses are now 20 times higher than Soviet losses in Afghanistan. In this war that Putin is continuing to pursue, Russia is now struggling to equip its forces, and in some areas, stocks are so low they have resorted to using military kit from the 1950s. And as a result of this war that Putin refuses to end, the IMF have revised down Russian growth forecasts, and military spending is now outstripping social spending for the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union. We know that with increased desperation, however, comes increased danger. And in recent weeks, Putin has engaged in provocative and reckless violations of NATO airspace in Estonia, Poland and Romania, against which NATO stands together, resolute and ready to act. His recent bombardment of Ukraine has seen some of the largest attacks in Europe since the height of the Second World War, with civilian casualties rising nearly 40%, with children killed in playgrounds, hospitals and schools destroyed, and civilian energy infrastructure targeted. Just yesterday, a UN aid convoy was hit, delivering vital assistance to a frontline community. So while we continue to strive for peace for Ukraine, we must be steeled for the war to continue. And that means focusing on 4 priorities. First, ensuring that Ukraine gets the support it needs to stand up to this latest onslaught. In my meetings with President Zelensky and Foreign Minister Sybiha in September, I reaffirmed the UK's ironclad support. We are providing £4.5 billion of military support for Ukraine this year, more than ever before, with over £150 million worth of air defence and artillery delivered in the last 2 months alone. We've used our co-chairmanship of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group to galvanise partners, raising over £2 billion through the UK-run International Fund for Ukraine to support the most urgent military needs. And during that Kyiv visit, I announced £142 million in UK aid to support Ukraine through the winter and into next year, including our largest emergency energy support package since the start of the war to restore and repair water, heating and electricity systems. Second, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will ramp up the pressure on Russia to ensure that their escalation comes at a clear cost. So I am today setting out a further new set of sanctions, among our strongest so far, to tighten the pressure on Russia's economy. This will be the second set of sanctions I have announced in a month, and I'm ready to go further still. It will take the total UK-imposed sanctions on Russia-related individuals and entities to over 2,900. At the UN Security Council last month, I told Foreign Minister Lavrov directly, shortly before he walked out of the chamber, that we will target your ailing economy, your oil and gas revenues, and the defence industry making your munitions, because we know for Russia the cost of war is piling up. With immediate effect, we are sanctioning Russia's two largest oil producers, Rosneft and Lukoil, the two biggest Russian energy firms ever targeted by UK sanctions. Part of an extensive new sanctions package of 90 targets, including refineries around the world that are responsible for importing Russian oil, suppliers of drone and missile components, and 44 shadow fleet vessels, further disrupting the network of tankers that transport Russia's oil. The UK has now sanctioned more shadow fleet vessels than any other partner, taking billions of dollars of Russian oil off the market. And we're sanctioning not just Russian individuals and companies, but also organisations in third countries who continue to support the Russian war effort, with all those damaging consequences, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe's stability too. And these sanctions stop UK businesses and individuals from trading or transacting with the actors that we have targeted. And importantly, we're also strengthening our coordination with the EU, who are finalising a new wave of sanctions, and we are urging countries across the world to go further, working with us in targeting Russian oil and gas. President Zelensky has made clear in recent months he supports a full unconditional ceasefire and is ready to meet with Putin for talks to achieve a just and lasting peace. President Trump has urged peace and ceasefire talks, but instead President Putin is seeking only to escalate the conflict, and that is why this economic and coordinated economic pressure is so urgent and important to get him to change course. Third, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will ensure that Ukraine gets the financial support it needs to recover and that Russia is the one to pay. The whole House will be aware of the acute financing needs facing Ukraine, both now and in the long term. So we are pushing at every level to ensure that frozen Russian assets can be used to meet these needs. They were on the agenda of the G7 finance ministers when they met on the 1st of October, and today the Chancellor is in Washington, again pressing for progress with her counterparts, as I have done directly with our European partners. And we will continue to argue that the full value of Russian sovereign assets must be used to support Ukraine. The EU has developed a proposal for reparations loans for Ukraine, which we welcome, and this has been discussed between the Prime Minister, Chancellor Merz, and President Macron. We expect and hope further progress will be made in the coming weeks. But finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, while we're prepared for this war to continue, we must also keep working and preparing for peace. We've seen in recent days what's possible when the international community builds a consensus for peace, and we know too the huge international coordination that has come behind the US peace initiative in the Middle East and the huge international effort that will be needed to ensure it is implemented. But those same principles on international coordination and effort over time are important for Ukraine. That's why, together with France, the UK government has convened over 30 countries in several meetings of the Coalition of the Willing, encouraging contributions towards a multinational force which would stand ready to deploy to Ukraine upon a ceasefire or peace agreement to help regenerate Ukraine's armed forces so that Russia is never able to attack again. And we're also implementing the 100-year partnership signed by the Prime Minister and President Zelensky in January, making real our commitment to stand with Ukraine not just today or tomorrow, but over many decades to come. Madam Deputy Speaker, while Ukraine continues to show its endless reserves of strength, Vladimir Putin continues to show his endless depths of depravity. Time and again, he's shown his willingness to threaten the security and sovereignty of other nations, to threaten democracy and undermine the world order, to kidnap, tens of thousands of children. From cyber attacks in Moldova to the deployment of mercenaries in the Sahel, Russia's actions seek to topple governments, fuel conflict and spread instability far beyond Europe's borders. That is why the UK continues to support Ukraine, not just to help brave people defend themselves, but to make clear that aggression does not pay, Putin does not win, that force will be resisted with strength, and that criminals will be held accountable. Madam Deputy Speaker, Ukraine's security is our security, and I commend this statement to the House.
As the Foreign Secretary, with prior agreement with the Chair, was allowed to speak a little while longer than the allocated time, the same will be allowed to the front benches on the opposite side as well. I now call the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel.
Speaker, I'm grateful to the Foreign Secretary for advance sight of her statement, and I also would like to welcome her to her place in her new role. We meet again at the dispatch box in the many roles of where we've been shadowing each other, and this time round it feels like she is indeed following me in this portfolio. Madam Deputy Speaker, on the occasion of the visit of the chairman of the Ukrainian Parliament to our Parliament, it is right that Britain stands with Ukraine on what will soon be the eve of the fourth winter of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Putin's relentless efforts to obtain by barbaric levels of force the territory of a sovereign European state has undermined peace in Europe and the established international order. In recent months, we have seen European and NATO airspace brazenly and deliberately violated by Russian fighter jets. From Poland to Estonia to Romania, such aggressive provocation must yield stronger deterrence against Russia. The same applies to the intensified aerial bombardment of Kyiv. The hundreds upon hundreds of Iranian Shahed drones attacking civilians is a cruel attempt by Putin to psychologically torture Ukrainians, but the bombing will not break their resolve. From Russia's kidnapping of Ukrainian children to the daily bombardment of propaganda and bombs, Britain must stand firm to level the playing field for Ukraine so that it can repel those attacks. Britain must continue to be at the forefront of continually refuelling our country's ability to support Ukraine, never standing still. So can the Foreign Secretary say, if she is brokering more packages here at home or across NATO to support Ukraine's air defence, the 100-year partnership agreement with Ukraine must be leveraged to support innovation in defence technology and production within Ukraine right now, while we also learn from Ukraine's successes in these fields. The way the Ukrainian people have conducted themselves and have continued to fight for what is rightfully theirs in the face of the barbarity and savagery that many of us thought was confined to the bygone era will go down in the records of history. We must ensure Russia's defeat goes down in history too. To do so, Britain must lead all allies to raise the price for Russia for its aggression by cutting off Russia's financial lifelines, which continue to fund Putin's war in Ukraine and fight against our democratic values. So I welcome the Foreign Secretary's announcements today of the new entities, including the ships that have been sanctioned as of today. She will, of course, know that China, India and Turkey have become the mainstay of Russian oil exports, together purchasing around $380 billion of Russian crude. This does provide Putin with a lifeline to fund this illegal war and invasion at the cost of around $1 billion per day. So in addition to the new sanctions announced today, can the Foreign Secretary confirm whether she or the Prime Minister has had any discussions with India, Turkey and China about the refineries in questions in their own countries purchasing Russian oil and then re-exporting them? And is the UK in a position to spearhead this direct challenge and get this stopped? Will the Foreign Secretary challenge European countries who are still importing Russian liquefied natural gas to phase this out far more rapidly? And I do recognise and appreciate her comments that she's made about EU countries and the sanction package. Further to the new banking sanctions announced, will she commit to review what we can do to limit Russia's banking sector, including their regional banks? On the mobilisation of frozen assets, we do need to go beyond just offering Ukraine loans from the revenues of the sanctioned assets and find a new formula under the law that mobilises the assets now to fund Ukraine's defeat of Russia in the immediate term. London is, of course, home to our world-class capital markets, and the City of London must be deployed to help find solutions to this, which our diplomats can then sell to our allies, because this needs concerted action. So can the Foreign Secretary confirm whether the Coalition of the Willing, convened in February this year, is as determined as it was then to not just stand with Ukraine, but work to find solutions to these major issues that we all see? The UK must be committed to 3% on defence by the end of the decade, and this is a vital step on our route to higher sustained spending, demanded by the new NATO targets. So may I ask, in her new role as Foreign Secretary, is she in discussions with the Chancellor about this? Because Britain must be ready for the continuous tensions with Russia, with the very effective deterrents, including against sub-conventional threats such as hybrid warfare, sabotage of infrastructure, disinformation, election interference and killings. If we do not put up boundaries now, Russia will come closer. But Russia is stoppable. We've seen positive developments in recent weeks, including in the decisive election result in Moldova, that should cement its Euro-Atlantic trajectory. But Russia's behaviour elsewhere, from Georgia to the Balkans, to the stationing of nuclear weapons in Belarus, is deeply alarming. And here at home, there are reports that the cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover may have emanated from Russia. Is the Foreign Secretary able to confirm the attribution of this to the House? The whole Euro-Atlantic alliance needs to be incredibly robust because the lessons of the last 20 years are crystal clear, and the outcome of the war in Ukraine will shape the future of European global security. President Trump's recent remarks were absolutely right. Our Ukrainian friends can regain the territory that is rightfully theirs, and we support them on that. Britain and our European allies must now pull out all the stops to help our Ukrainian friends expedite Putin's exit from their country. And we should be clear that territorial concessions must never happen, as this would be a reward for Putin's barbarism. Britain should lead the way and can lead the way in weakening Putin's war machine with a full range of hard-hitting new sanctions and brokering new military packages of aid with our allies to ensure that Ukraine has the capabilities it needs to defeat Putin's tyranny.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome the Shadow Foreign Secretary's response, and very glad to be facing her back across the dispatch boxes again. I think she and I probably missed each other, and this is perhaps a very new experience for both of us to be standing opposite each other at the dispatches boxes and actually agreeing on some things compared to the last time round. I did actually check, it was the last time that she and I were opposite each other in the standing opposite each other on other sides of the dispatch box, and I think it was the 5th of September. And it was the day, in fact, that Liz Truss was confirmed as Prime Minister. Perhaps not quite such a good day for the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who at that time, as Home Secretary, then lost her place on the front bench, but also not such a good time for the country either, as well. But it was, interestingly, that day, after we had our exchanges that day, the next discussion that day was a discussion on Ukraine. And that was 2022. And my right honourable friend, the current Defence Secretary, speaking the benches opposite that day, began his remarks by observing that it was day 194 of a war that Vladimir Putin had expected to be over inside a week. And he saluted the bravery of the Ukrainian resistance and pledged the Labour Party's full backing for every aspect of what her government was then doing at the time. So now here we are, not on day 194, but day 1,330. And still all of us in this House full of admiration and respect for the Ukrainian resistance, still all of us determined to support Ukraine in the face of the continuing Russian onslaught. So I welcome the Shadow Foreign Secretary's continuation of that cross-party support for the Ukrainian people and for the actions that we need to continue to take to support Ukraine, both in its defence and also in the pressure that we need. So I can assure her that we will continue to support Ukraine's defences and continue to look at what more we can do. And the Defence Secretary has also set out new partnerships, particularly working with Ukraine on developing new drone technology, both learning from their technological technological experiences and also helping them with production as well. She also raised the issues about third countries, including countries including China and India and Turkey, and also other European countries that have continued to be involved in purchasing things from Russia. What I can tell her is that we want as wide as possible a consensus on economic pressure on Russia over Ukraine, and I am continuing to raise this with very many different countries, including some of those that she's referred to, and also we are also including as part of our sanctions packages sanctions against entities operating in third countries now as well, because we need to continue to do so. We also need to be clear that the ability to target the Russian sovereign assets needs to be about mobilising the assets themselves and going further and ensuring that there is an effective way to do so. We do believe that there is an effective way to do so, and that we have been working with the EU to do so, and will continue to put considerable pressure on as many countries as possible to join us in taking action around Russian sovereign assets. I think all of us in this House are clear, I hope, or at least the majority of the parties in this House are clear, with some unfortunate exception, but I think the majority of this House is clear that we will need to continue to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, not just now, not just tomorrow, but for the future to come. Thank you.
Select Committee Chair Dame Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by welcoming the Foreign Secretary to her new post publicly, and to echo the comments that she made about the previous Foreign Secretary. Can I also welcome her commitment to finally using the Russian frozen assets? I hope that the situation will be resolved soon, because they are needed for the defence and reconstruction of Ukraine. I'm pleased to see that she's going to take further advantage of Britain's unique sanctions regime to extend against the Russian individuals and countries. But she knows, particularly given her previous experience, perhaps better than most, that a regime is only as good as its enforcement. And there are times when doors need to be kicked down. What worries me is that the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation told the Treasury Committee a year ago that they had only implemented one £15,000 fine against British businesses for engaging with a sanctioned individual. So in the time since, in the last year, could she please tell us how many British businesses have faced financial penalties for direct or indirect breaches of sanctions on Russia or the Russian state, and what has been the value of those fines?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome the point that the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has raised, and also thank her for her considerable work and expertise and the work that her committee does in this area as well. She will know that the Foreign Office sets out the framework for sanctions and then works with the Treasury as well around the enforcement. And following the publication of the cross-government review on enforcement in May of this year, the government is committing to take stronger action to make compliance easier, but also to deter non-compliance and to make sure that there is proper enforcement in place. I'm advised that in 2025, the Office of Financial Sanctions implementation so far has totalled penalties of over 900,000, including an HMRC 1.1 million compound settlement. And in April, the National Crime Agency has secured the first convictions for breaches of Russian financial sanctions, but I am happy to work with the Chancellor to ensure she has any further information that she wants on that topic.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson James McCleary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and my thanks to the Minister for advance sight of her statement today. I'd start off by warmly welcoming the announcement of fresh sanctions aimed at cutting Putin's oil and gas profits. It is vital that we make use of all the tools at our disposal to undermine his war machine, and we know that the oil and gas revenues are primarily what is being used to fund it. So these measures are a further step in the right direction. But today I'd like to encourage the government to go even further. Analysis by the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air, a think tank, shows that UK-owned or insured LNG carriers have facilitated the transport of £45 billion of Russian gas since the start of the full-scale invasion. That means that 76% of the total export value of Russian LNG was carried on UK-owned or insured vessels. It is unconscionable that the UK businesses are still contributing to Putin's coffers. So will the Minister commit today to banning the provision of maritime services for Russian gas, including transport and insurance, and engage directly with the maritime insurance sector, a large proportion of which is based here in the UK, to find practical ways to implement such a ban? On the frozen Russian assets, I was very pleased to hear the Minister's ambition to progress plans to use their full value to support Ukraine's war effort. It is a measure which the Liberal Democrats have been pushing for action on for some months now. The government needs to move at pace as Ukraine continues to face Putin's relentless assault. So can the Secretary of State confirm to me the timetable she is looking at for new funds becoming available from the frozen assets? Can she outline how they will be allocated? And if barriers to seizing these assets are put in place internationally, can she commit to the UK government acting unilaterally with regard to seizing the assets held here in the UK? It is now also over 3 years since Roman Abramovich sold Chelsea Football Club. In June, the then Foreign Secretary said that the government was ready and willing to take legal action to finally secure the £2.5 billion generated from the sale, earmarked for additional support for Ukraine. It appears, however, that in that regard, the government's bark so far has been worse than its bite, as we have heard no more about how the government intends to pursue those assets. So can the Minister update the House today on what concrete action the government has taken since June to secure them? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we all hope to see a just peace in Ukraine, at which point thoughts will switch to reconstruction. So can the Secretary of State commit to providing full UK backing, including funding, to the Council of Europe's Register of Damage for Ukraine? Thank you, Madam.
Foreign Secretary. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Liberal Democrat front bench spokesperson for his questions and also his continued support for Ukraine as well. What I can tell him is we are determined to tighten the restrictions much further on not simply on the oil and gas companies themselves, although this is the first time to sanction these major companies, but also the distribution networks and those who continue to profit. So on the 12th of September, I announced 100 new sanctions, which included 70 more ships in the shadow fleet. Today, I have announced in the second sanctions package that I have announced since being appointed, a further sanctions on a further 44 shadow fleet ships as well, because we are clear that that shadow fleet is otherwise undermining the impact of the sanctions that we have set out. On the Russian sovereign assets, this is an issue in order to have a proper impact, both in terms of the impact on Russia, but also in terms of the market impact as well. It is right that we should be working alongside partners, but we do welcome, as a result of that, the statements from President von der Leyen and the G7 finance ministers. I can tell him that this is a huge priority for me and for the Chancellor, who is pursuing exactly these issues about the timetables and about what final steps we need to take around Russian sovereign assets in Washington today. I can also tell him that the issue around the proceeds from the sale of the Chelsea Football Club is a priority for me personally as well, ensuring that they can reach humanitarian causes in Ukraine following Russia's illegal full-scale invasion. And I am deeply frustrated that has not been possible so far. But we are fully prepared to pursue this matter through the courts if required, while the door for negotiations remain open. And again, this is a matter that I have discussed not just with the Chancellor, but internationally as well.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you. I first want to thank the Speaker, the Speaker's Office and the Deputy Speakers for the gracious welcome they gave Ruslan Stepanchuk, the Speaker of the Rada, today, and also seeing the Foreign Secretary in Kiev on her first foreign visit, which was a real fillip to the people of Ukraine. I'd like to thank her for the sanctions package today, but I'd like to ask further questions about the siege of Russian assets. I'm pleased that we're ready to progress the siege of Russian assets, announcing work with France and Germany. But I'd like to ask the Foreign Secretary whether we are working at pace with our allies to ensure the siege of Russian assets. Ukrainians know that the best chance they have of winning this war is to move from freezing to seizing of the assets. And I also want to ask if the United Kingdom will be providing finance for the reparations loan that the EU is proposing.
Secretary.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for what I know has been his continued work for many years on Ukraine. It was certainly very good to see him at the event in Kyiv as well. What I can reassure him is that we think that the work that the EU has done on the provided drawing up a new mechanism to be able to effectively mobilise the assets that are being held. We think that mechanism that they have set out is a really important one. We support that work, and it is on that basis that we believe that we and the EU and other allies should be trying to seek to make as rapid progress now, because ultimately the rebuilding of Ukraine, the support for Ukraine, should be paid for by Russia.
Rishi Sunak.
I welcome the Foreign Secretary to her new role and commend her on a very strong statement. And I welcome the progress that's being made by the G7 finance ministers in DC on this issue of seizing the Russian state assets. It's an issue I first started working on 3 years ago, and I know that the current Chancellor has continued that work. Now, because of that, there is a body of very clear technical analysis that's been done in the Treasury that I think shows clearly at this point that, firstly, there is a sound legal basis for taking these assets and using them. Secondly, that there is now a practical way to use them, especially as the bonds have matured into cash. And thirdly, that by acting in concert with allies, any risk to financial stability can be absolutely minimised. So can I continue to urge the Foreign Secretary to show continued UK leadership on this issue, as I know she is, especially sharing that work with our European allies, because I know she will agree with me that this is an urgent issue that requires action.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome all the points the Right Honourable Member and former Prime Minister has said, and also pay tribute to the work that I know that he did both as Chancellor and as Prime Minister to support Ukraine and to support the defence of Ukraine, and particularly also this work around Russian sovereign assets and different ways to ensure that there remains market stability, that we have the proper financial safeguards in place, but that we can make sure that money can get to Ukraine as a result of all of this. I have spoken myself both to colleagues in Belgium and France over the last week alone. As you know, the Prime Minister has discussed this with French and German counterparts in the last week as well. We will continue to press on every avenue to make the progress that he's talking about.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to welcome my right honourable friend to her place and welcome the statement that she's made. In September, the Yale University Humanitarian Research Lab revealed that the number of facilities Russia is using in its forced deportation of Ukrainian children has risen from 53 to 210. That report highlighted that 110 facilities were being used to re-educate children, and that at 39 of those facilities, military training was being provided to train Ukrainian children to throw the grenades and pilot the drones that are destroying their homes and killing their families. So could my right honourable friend outline what further steps are being taken to relocate, rescue and return those children to their families?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome the point that my honourable friend has made? The forcible deportation, the kidnapping of almost 20,000 Ukrainian children by Russia is one of the most disturbing aspects of this war. I agree with her with the importance of supporting those families. We have been supporting organisations such as Bring Kids Back, UA, and Save Ukraine, who are supporting efforts to return Ukrainian children. And just 2 weeks ago, Baroness Harman attended the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children event at the UN General Assembly. We will continue to do all we can to support the return of those children.
Father of the House, Edward Lee.
50 years ago, I was working down the corridor here for Margaret Thatcher, and I make this point to give an opportunity to the Foreign Secretary to pay tribute on the centenary of her birth to the lady who won the Cold War with Ronald Reagan. And the other point I want to make is that why did we win the Cold War? We didn't fire a single bullet. It was all about economic pressure on the Soviet Union, of course, the precursor of Russia. So I really want to follow my right honourable friend, the former Prime Minister. I think the whole House is determined on this, is united on this issue of Russian assets. And I'm also serve on the Council of Europe, and everybody there is passing motions trying to propel this forward. So is she confident that we can actually make progress on this? Because the way to bring down this regime and to end this war is, as we did with the Soviet Union, to break them economically.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I think all of us would recognise the challenging jobs for all Prime Ministers, no matter our parties. He will understand that for a coal mining constituency like mine, there were obviously very strong views against the right former Prime Minister that the Father of the House refers to, but I do also pay tribute to his long service in this place that he has also referred to. I think there is strong agreement really across this House. We have to get those assets mobilised. We have to get that investment and that support into Ukraine. And it is right that Russia should pay the price for reconstructing, rebuilding and also defending Ukraine.
Dame Neil Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, it was really great to see the Secretary of State out in Ukraine. I know it was very, very much appreciated by the Ukrainian colleagues. And I would obviously, my right honourable friend will be very, very well aware that foreign investment is absolutely vital to the economy and the reconstruction of Ukraine. So I was wondering what talks she has had with ministerial colleagues and others about schemes such as that suggested by the British-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, which proposes using frozen Russian assets and/or Western government guarantees administered by the World Bank to provide greater availability of risk insurance for British investors in Ukraine.
Well, and I welcome my honourable friend's points that we need to, she's right, we need to look at different innovative ways of providing the financial support, providing the commitment and investment that Ukraine will need. This is about, obviously, there are immediate issues around the defence equipment and also the support, like the support for the energy infrastructure that we are providing, but there will also be issues around longer-term investment, and we should look innovatively at different ways to be able to support that.
Sir Duncan Smith.
Deputy Speaker, I'm Chairman of the All Party Parliamentary Group on Magnitsky sanctions, and we've been encouraging the last government and the present government to be much more aggressive about their sanctions regime. When you look at the numbers of people sanctioned, it doesn't compare to what the United States has done and many others. So, number one, I think this whole business of the money from the Chelsea sale, it's long overdue that this was settled, and it just beggars belief that we haven't managed to get that one done. And the other bit here, and I agree with my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, the ex-Prime Minister rather, some of us live in hope, but I simply say that the shadow fleets could easily be attacked by sanctioning British marine insurers who have insured these ships. Without that insurance, they will not put to sea because they will have no financial backing for it. Why we haven't done that up until now is a complete mystery to me. That surely is something we should get on with straight away because we can action that immediately.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I thank the right honourable member for his long-standing commitment on these issues, both around issues around sanctions, but also around Russia and Ukraine as well. Tell him is the impact of the sanctions is that any company or any UK company or resident that transacts with, as well as trades with, those sanctioned bodies will therefore be covered by the sanctions as well. And we will continue to look at what further we can do keep increasing the pressure on Russia. I can assure him on the Chelsea Football Club proceeds, I strongly agree that this needs to move as swiftly as possible, and I can also assure him that this has been something that I have focused on significantly since I arrived in this post as well, and we will continue to do all that we can in these areas to support Ukraine.
Tulip Sadiq. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent in Hampstead and Highgate is a refugee from Ukraine whose home and livelihood was destroyed in Ukraine. She contacted me because of the uncertainty of her visa situation. Her 3-year visa will expire in December, but she can't apply for extension until November, which is stopping her from getting a new job and also stopping her from securing a new tenancy agreement. She's at risk of becoming homeless in the coming weeks. I recognise that my honourable friend is now the Foreign Secretary, but she knows the Home Office well, and I want to know what conversations she's had with colleagues from the Home Office about reviewing the Ukrainian visa scheme so that Ukrainians can actually rebuild their lives in this country.
Can I welcome my honourable friend's support for refugees, for those who have come on the Homes for Ukraine scheme, also from other Ukrainian schemes here. As she will know, that the government has extended the visas, has set out provision for the extension of the visas, and I think the point that she is referring to is to do with the timing of the mechanism of the Home Office mechanism about the timings of when applications can go in, and I will raise that issue with the Home Secretary.
Select Committee Member Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary mentioned that the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, the Rada, was here today and was in the gallery. And he also met this morning with members of the Ukraine All-Party Group. Speaker Stefanchuk made the parallel between Western sanctions packages and versions of the Apple iPhone. It feels like we see a new one every other week. Rather than the gradual introduction of sanctions on Russia, will the Foreign Secretary work with the United States administration and other allies to introduce a sanctions package that will really hurt Russian oligarchs in the pocket?
Foreign Secretary.
So I want to see the strongest possible economic pressure on Russia from every avenue, frankly, and it is an issue that we have discussed extensively with the US. It's an issue that we have discussed extensively with Europe. It is an issue that I discuss with my foreign minister colleagues, but also that the Chancellor discusses with her finance minister colleagues as well. We want to see the strongest package. I think we are, however, I do think it is right to continue to introduce new sanctions as soon as we have the evidence ready. I don't think we should wait until more work can be done or more agreement can be reached. If we have the evidence to be able to introduce another set of sanctions, frankly, I think we should get on with it, because we need to maximise the economic pressure as rapidly as we possibly can to put pressure on Putin's war machine.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Foreign Secretary agree that more must be done to inform not just the British public, but also countries which are equivocal in their support for Ukraine, that Russia's illegal invasion is particularly egregious in its cynical and cruel targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure? I pay tribute to a member of Rugby's Ukrainian committee who told me today, Russia strikes not only the front line, but homes, hospitals and power plants. Whole regions are left in darkness after systematic attacks. Just recently, a maternity hospital in Sumy was targeted, and yet people wake up after night of bombardment, go to work, children go to school. The unimaginable has become normal. That's the true horror. Does she agree that these horrors can only strengthen our resolve in supporting Ukraine?
We must maintain the strongest of resolves in supporting Ukraine. I talked to families, to children who have to sleep in the corridor or in underground car parks at night to avoid drone attacks, but still get up for school, get up and carry on with their lives each day. The Ukrainian people are showing that resilience. We will continue to support them.
Sir Julian Lewis.
The only thing wrong with the Secretary of State's admirable statement is the fact that it was made by a British Foreign Secretary rather than the President of the United States. Given that only a few months ago, President Trump was saying that President Zelensky had few, if any, cards to play, whereas she takes a much more optimistic view of the geopolitical situation as it regards the invasion of Ukraine. Has she identified any signs that the leader of the free world is coming to a more realistic view of the nature of the killer in the Kremlin?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, this is an issue that we have discussed considerably with the US, and I welcome President Trump's decision, for example, to enable NATO allies to purchase the vital US military equipment for Ukraine's defence, including Patriots, for example. And I think what we saw is President Trump called for a peace process around Ukraine, and President Zelensky was ready to have those peace discussions, but President Putin has done the opposite. And I think there is a growing sense of frustration that everybody can see that President Putin has just ignored those requests for peace discussions and instead is actually seeking to do the opposite, not just in Ukraine itself, but also those attempts to destabilise NATO airspace as well.
Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The NATO PA delegation, of which the Deputy Leader, the member for Wetherby and Easingwold, he sat on the opposition front bench, met with the Ukrainian delegation over the weekend and also heard of President Zelensky. Can I say it was a sort of the same line we heard from him time and time again, is the need for more weapons, equipment and munitions. And particularly, as we know, in terms of deep fire missiles, drones, munitions. So can I say this to the Foreign Secretary and welcome her statement, is that a lot has been said today about the need to unfreeze Russian assets and to use the full value. And she's made comments about work is being done. There are numerous occasions in this House when we've seen things happen quickly. I think things need to move at pace to ensure that the industrial capacity that they still have free in Ukraine that can make these things is used by funding it as quickly as possible.
Foreign Secretary.
I welcome my honourable friend's point, because we do want to see progress made as rapidly as possible. He will know that the UK has stepped up support for Ukraine this year, the military support that we directly provide, including providing £4.5 billion of military support, which is more than ever before, including thousands of air defence missiles and drones. We want to go further with the Russian sovereign assets process.
Can I remind colleagues that we have another statement of business later on, and questions do not require a preamble. They should be sharp and to the point. Stephen Gethins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I congratulate the Foreign Secretary on her appointment and welcome her remarks that the consensus that we have around the war in Ukraine has held across, well, the vast majority of this chamber. Can I ask her, she's got a fresh set of eyes, can she look at the efficiency of some of the aid that we're going to? Can we work more closely with organisations like the Come Back Alive Foundation, or can more work be done in Ukraine? I think the UK is doing a good job on this, but a fresh set of eyes is always welcome. Thank you.
Well, we always want to ensure that whether the aid we provide, the defence support we provide, that all of that is done in the most effective way, but crucially in partnership with Ukraine, because Ukraine themselves, who know where their greatest need lies, as a sovereign nation, that is what we support.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the measures that have been announced today, particularly on oil and gas revenues. This comes as Russia continues to target Ukrainian energy infrastructure, including a Ukrainian state-run power plant last night. So how is the government supporting Ukrainian homes to keep warm over winter? And will she join me in paying tribute to the Huddersfield Ukrainian Club, who continue to support Ukrainians who have arrived in Huddersfield since the conflict?
Can I welcome the support she's providing in her constituency, and that her community is supporting as well. We've seen that happen right across the country. She's right to focus on the impact on families, because Russia is deliberately trying to target the heating, the lighting for families across Ukraine as they go into winter by targeting their infrastructure. We have just announced, and I announced that in Kyiv, a £42 £42 million energy support package, which is exactly to provide support to keep homes warm, to support the resilience of the Ukrainian people through the winter.
Sir Bernard Jenkin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, given that time is the most precious commodity in war, and as Eliza Manningham-Buller, the former head of MI5, said, Britain may already be at war with Russia, why have we allowed Russia so much time? For example, to build up a stock of 155 shells, 3 times the quantity of the entire European and American stock of 155 shells. How long has Ukraine now got to hold out against Russia, who has mobilized their entire economy onto a war footing to win this war at almost any cost to themselves? Don't we have to up our long-range weapons support and our other military support to help Ukraine finish this war and win this war?
Foreign Secretary.
So, as I just set out, the UK has stepped up support for Ukraine this year, providing the £4.5 billion of military support. We will need to continue to provide military support to Ukraine, but we also need to encourage as many other allies to do so as well. And it was striking for me in Kyiv, meeting the Prime Minister and President, how much they saw the UK as a leading ally, but also recognised the need for this international partnership and support. We need to continue to escalate the support. That's why we also need this pressure on the economic side as well as on the defence side, because it's only by that combined concerted effort will we be able to affect the course of this war.
Luke Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a privilege today to meet with the Chair of the Rada of Ukraine and add my voice to the shared commitment across this House to stand with Ukraine and in defence of our democratic values. In order to increase economic pressure on Russia, we must look to sanction Russian-linked companies operating in third countries, including in the energy sector. So can the Foreign Secretary assure the House that she will apply maximum pressure on such companies, even when based outside Russia itself?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend, and I can tell him that we have increasingly now, as part of the sanctions packages, both in September and this month's sanction packages, are now increasingly looking at entities in third countries which are continuing to heavily support the transit, the exports of Russian oil and gas in order to make sure that those sanctions can really bite.
Helen Maguire.
Deputy Speaker, I just returned from Ukraine, where I learnt firsthand about the challenges that both the military and the emergency services are facing in dealing with unexploded ordnance and their impact when visiting the heroic patients at Superhumans, the prosthetic super centre in Lviv. In Ukraine, there are over 60,000 amputees from the war. The need is immense. So will the Minister consider further strengthening the Strategic Health Alliance for UK-Ukraine trauma recovery with additional funding over and above the £1.2 million already pledged?
Well, we will continue to look alongside all of our allies at the different forms and the different ways in which our support can be provided. That's why we particularly had highlighted the energy infrastructure and the support for homes. But she is right to highlight the resilience and determination of the Ukrainian emergency services, those who have to respond every morning to see where strikes have taken place, who have to respond in the middle of the night when the drones arrive, and we should all pay tribute to their bravery and strength.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think all of us who have visited Ukraine will know the stoicism of the people. And despite being bombarded night after night, they continue to rebuild, often supported by UK businesses and individuals and others around the European Union. But does she agree with me that we must do more to continue to encourage businesses and individuals to support Ukraine in any way they possibly can, but ultimately it's Putin's responsibility to pay for the damage he is causing to the country, and his responsibility only?
I agree. We do expect Putin to pay and the Russian to pay for the damage that they are doing by this invasion, this unprovoked aggression in Ukraine. We will continue to support Ukraine and encourage everybody else to do so, but ultimately we need Russia to pay for the damage they've done.
Lisa Smart.
Speaker, I welcome many of the measures that the Foreign Secretary has outlined today. Like her, I visited Ukraine and seen the impact of the attacks from Putin and his flunkies, and like her, I've seen the resilience from the Ukrainian people. I also believe, as we all do in this chamber today, that Putin and his flunkies must pay for their crimes. Could the Foreign Secretary confirm if the UK government would support pursuing legally through International Criminal Court those individuals responsible for their crimes?
Good idea.
Well, as you know, we continue to support international law and international court processes as well. But she's also right to say that Russia ultimately needs to pay the price and to be held account for the damage they are doing. And I hope she would also agree what an incredibly beautiful city Kyiv is, and how much so many people are going about their daily lives in exactly the same way, undeterred and determined, in fact, not to let Russia win.
Deputy Speaker, the politicians, civilians, soldiers that I spoke to last month in Kiev were unambiguous when asked what is the best thing the UK could do to help them win the war. The hundreds of billions of frozen Russian assets that they currently can't deploy can help them bolster their military and swing the war decisively in their favour. So on their behalf, can I ask the Foreign Secretary to use every power available to her to unlock these assets and put them in the service of the people of Ukraine?
Can I welcome his support for unlocking the Russian sovereign assets? It is something that the Chancellor is raising in Washington with international partners, probably pretty much as we speak.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. Can I welcome the Secretary of State to her place? I know the experience that you bring from the other ministerialship will benefit all, not just her, but all of us in this House, and thank you for all of her answers. With Putin having watched carefully to the Israeli-Gaza problem, he will know that all eyes are turning to Russia to end that unnecessary conflict. So what further steps in cooperation with our American allies can be taken to seize this opportunity to end bloodshed, restore education and hope for Ukrainian children, and thereby ensure that Putin realises he has no other option other than the cessation of Russian aggression? Thank you so much.
Can I thank the honourable member for his kind words, and that I agree with him that ultimately there must be no other option for Putin than to cease this aggression, and this is ultimately about hope for Ukrainian children.
Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I strongly welcome the sanctions targeting the $108 billion in oil revenue that the Kremlin still received last year, and also the progress on the $350 billion in frozen Russian sovereign assets, and applaud the Foreign Secretary and the Chancellor for their efforts in building a coalition with the EU and others to move from using the interest payments to the capital. And does she agree with me that this recent breakthrough shows that legally this money should be treated as a down payment on the reparations for the horrific harm that Russia has caused, but we know they will do everything to avoid paying?
Well, my honourable friend makes an important point, and this reflects the work that the EU has set out about linking the issues around assets to reparation payments as well. We welcome that work, and we believe that there is a strong basis to go forward. We need to do so in a coordinated way, but we just need to recognise the importance of supporting Ukraine.
Chris Coughlin.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the government's progress on the frozen Russian assets. However, it is disappointing that they, as of yet, are only allocated to recovery and not military capability, because Russia is spending $40 billion more on the war in Ukraine than Ukraine and her Western allies. While the courage of Ukrainian forces have fought Russia to a standstill, does the Foreign Secretary agree that if those frozen assets were used today to close and exceed that military spending gap, then Ukraine would have a path not just to stop Russia, but to win?
Well, what I would say is we're already increasing the military support from the UK. We do want to see that happen across the board as well. But I actually think the way to put the greatest pressure on Russia is always going to be through a mix of different measures. It's going to be through that direct defence support. It's also going to be through support for the resilience of the Ukrainian people, for example, just their basic energy infrastructure, making sure that they can keep going and keep their communities going, and also establishing the strong economic pressure on Russia so that they are put in a position where they have to change force. We're going to need all of those things to happen at once in order to be able to have a significant impact on the way that Putin is behaving.
Turner.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement today and the decision that she made as Home Secretary recently in respect of the Ukraine Permission Extension scheme. Does she agree that when Putin probes to weakness, we must respond by demonstrating strength? And does she further agree that the post-war development of Ukraine's own significant energy resources, which may require British technical expertise, would serve the dual purpose of helping to reconstruct Ukraine's own shattered economy and increasing Europe's own security of energy supply?
I agree with my honourable friend that Ukraine's security is Europe's security in so many different ways, in defence terms, but also in energy fields as well. And that is why it is so important that we should continue to support Ukraine, and also to continue to support Ukrainians who are here in the UK, who came at the beginning of the war to find safety.
Danny Chambers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier this year I joined a brilliant organisation called Mighty Convoy, where we drove some refurbished ambulances to Ukraine full of medical supplies. And while we were there, we happened to bump into another organisation called Fire Aid, who are taking refurbished fire engines to Ukraine from the UK. Not only is this equipment vital for the war effort, but the Ukrainians we met said it is such a morale boost to know not only the British government are behind their war efforts, but also the British public are too. Would the Foreign Secretary join me in thanking all the volunteers from the UK who drive equipment to Ukraine to help with that war effort?
Yeah. The honourable member, it's a really important point about the strength of support there is across the country from communities, civil society. That is really important for Ukraine, for Ukrainians to hear at a time when they are showing such resilience and strength, to know that people across the UK have huge respect for what they're doing and will continue to support it. And I do welcome the work of different organisations to raise funds and to be able to provide support for Ukraine.
Final question, Martin Wrigley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank the Foreign Secretary for, in her previous role, extending the Homes for Ukraine scheme by 2 years, and welcome her to her new role. This morning, the chair of the RADA, speaking to the parliamentary group, also talked of how Russian manufacturers are now using advanced electronics from white goods to build their drones. What will the Foreign Secretary do to prevent such vital equipment going to them through the export of seemingly harmless white goods?
The honourable member is right to raise issues about broader technology, and it's why we need to ensure that our sanctions regime is continually updating and continually responding as well. I think what we've also seen, though, is immense improvements in Ukrainian technology on different responses, particularly around drone technology and countering drone technology as well. So I think we need to recognise the expertise and the strength of the Ukrainian people, of the country of Ukraine, and continue to show our support at every level.
That concludes the statement on Ukraine. I'll allow the front benches a few moments to shuffle over as we prepare for the second statement. War, you do not cross the front bench even to take a short cut. It's not on. It's not on. Second statement, pride in place. I call the Minister, Mayeta Fambola.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to make a statement on the action we are taking to restore pride in place. Britain's renewal is a driving mission of this Labour government, and we know that this must be seen, felt and heard in every single neighbourhood. Our identity, sense of patriotism and feeling of belonging can all depend on the condition of our local area and the view from our doorstep. Our neighbourhoods are the nation's barometer for whether all of us in this House are doing our jobs. And under 14 years of Conservative failure, the needle of that barometer has increasingly pointed in the wrong direction. The effect of this decline in pride in place has been corrosive. It has eroded people's trust in politics and the state. It has created a sense of unfairness that some places have fared better than others, and has opened the door to the plastic patriots in the Reform Party who say there is a simple answer. So, let me say from the start that we are under no illusions that both the causes and the answers to this decline are complex. The failure of the party opposite to properly fund local government, the sharp transition away from industry, and the broken Tory promises of levelling up must shoulder part of the blame. And we cannot and we will not pretend either that the legacies of any of those issues can be reversed overnight. But what we can be confident of, as both a Labour government and a Parliament, is that the way we restore pride in place lies not in this chamber or in the corridors of Whitehall. The answer is in the communities we each represent. Yeah. Our job is to give our constituents the investment and the powers they need so they can deliver the change that they want to see in their communities. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is why we have announced the Pride in Place programme backed up by £5 billion. Yeah. This is a priority for the Prime Minister, choosing renewal over decline, unity over division. This is our plan for change in action, giving power and pride back to the people who make Britain great. There are two categories of investment. The first, the main programme, is a flagship Pride in Place programme that will provide up to £20 million of funding and support to each area over the course of a decade, focused on specific neighbourhoods. Communities will need to decide how this funding is spent. We establish a neighbourhood board in every place made up of local people. Residents, business owners, community leaders will come together alongside their Member of Parliament to come up with a 10-year plan for this investment. They could choose to bring a derelict pub back into use for the community, transform a boarded-up shop into a wellbeing hub, improve local transport links, create a new playground, or roll out a community-level service to help with the cost of living. Local people know best what change is needed. Yeah. This programme is about local communities taking back control. As long as the plan provides value for money, the board will have our full support to deliver the change the community needs. We are taking inspiration from the New Deal for Communities, which under the last Labour government put local communities in charge of renewing their neighbourhoods. But we're also adapting to the world as we find it today and learning the lessons of what did and did not work last time round. The second programme, the Pride in Place Impact Fund, will provide a short-term injection of £1.5 million per place. This will be delivered by local authorities for the most immediate results in 3 phases: community spaces, public spaces, and high streets and town centre revitalisation. Despite the shorter timeframe of the fund, there is still an important emphasis on local collaboration. We will ask local communities to work closely with MPs and local authority to ensure investment decisions reflect local priorities and community needs. Now, our economic situation means that we are not in a position to cover everywhere that would benefit from this programme. We have therefore prioritised places with the highest level of need, those places that have been left behind and let down, communities that were hollowed out over 14 years of Conservative austerity, for which the party opposite should hang their heads in shame. Yeah. But let me say this. It is important to this Labour government that every community has the power to renew their area. And so alongside this investment, we have published the Pride in Place strategy. The purpose of the strategy is to promote the same principle of community power across the entire country, and it centres on 3 aims. The first, building stronger communities, means bringing people together, which we see as the foundation for a greater sense of belonging and local pride. When people spend time with each other in their community, including those from different backgrounds, they see that they have more in common than separates them. This sense of shared endeavour means communities are more likely to take steps to improve their local area. As part of this, we will fund locally led interventions to build community resilience, encouraging volunteers through co-produced policies and tackle loneliness. We recognise that this can only be delivered by a whole-of-government approach. So this section of the strategy includes policies from the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sports and the Home Office. The second aim, creating thriving places, is how we promote pride in place in the most direct sense by improving how the public realm looks. As a government, we see a direct link between the declining appearance of our local neighbourhoods and how people feel not just about their immediate area, but also about the country and the world around them. Of course, we acknowledge that the performance of the public realm is often a reflection of the economy and the work of local authorities, which is why we are focused on growth and fixing the foundations of local government. But even in times where the economy has been strong and local government was funded properly, the effects have not always been felt in the public realm. Fixing that disconnect is the inspiration for policies to encourage the application of shopfront design guides as well as the use of clean-up powers. What links all of these policies in this section of the paper is that they are empowering our communities to create thriving places. This is not an attempt to micromanage change from Whitehall. The final strand, helping communities to take back control of their own lives and areas, sets out our plan to give people a stronger voice in what matters to them. Each of us in this House will have spoken to constituents who talk of helplessness, when the place they live in is changing in ways they did not ask for and feel they have no control over. Sometimes it's antisocial behaviour on their estate. Other times it's the shop being lost from the high street. People want to be in control of their surroundings. But that is such a distant concept where you don't feel safe going out at night, or when you don't have a say over how your town centre looks. A lot of these feelings, again, stem from the effects of the Conservative government's 14 years of austerity, which took libraries and leisure centres from some of the most deprived and disadvantaged communities. And when combined with the closure of pubs, sports clubs, social clubs, for much of the country there are fewer and fewer places for people to come together and take pride in. We are therefore introducing a community right to buy, to give local residents new powers to save treasured assets, giving more people a say in their local economy by creating a new cooperative development unit in my department, and requiring all authorities in England to establish effective neighbourhood governance. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Labour government's Pride in Place programme is an investment in the UK's future, backing the true patriots who build up our communities across every corner of the country. Alongside our strategy, it aims to spark a new way of governing, where power and resources is more readily shared with our communities. But like devolution, this needs to mark the start of a process rather than a single event. We have specifically designed both investment programmes with a guaranteed role for local members of Parliament. So I want to finish by encouraging members from across the House to get involved. At a time when trust is low and the demand for change is high, this is an opportunity for all of us to make a real, tangible difference to our communities by giving people power to those, by giving real power to those we are elected to serve.
I call the Shadow Minister, David Simmons.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we speak in this statement of pride. This side of the House has pride in our local pubs, 200 of which have closed in the last 6 months, hammered by the business rate rises of the party opposite. We're proud of our restaurants, closing at record numbers under the business rates burden imposed by this government. We are proud of our local shops, who, according to the British Retail Consortium, are buckling under an additional $7 billion of annual costs imposed by this government. We are proud of our family businesses, the bedrock of our high streets, buckling under new taxes introduced by this government. We are proud of our family farms, buckling under the new taxes imposed by this government. We are proud of our local councils, who are facing maxing out the council tax. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we hear of 20 billion at a local level. Those councils are maxing out the council tax across the country, not to invest in new local services, but to pay an additional £1.5 billion of annual costs imposed on them by this government's job tax. that makes them £1.5 billion net worse off every year when it comes to delivering local services. And we are proud, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are proud of the workers of this country, of which there were 4 million more when this party left office last year. 97,000 of those people in the retail sector alone have lost their jobs since this government took office. So what we see, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a fig leaf, an element relabelled from past programmes like the Long-Term Plan for Towns, slightly redirected to Labour areas, that covers up a collapse in the ability of our elected local representatives to invest in their communities. As in so many things, Madam Deputy Speaker, this gets worse every day under the party opposite. So let me pose some specific questions to the Minister. Firstly, why so much complex governance around this? Why not listen to the cries of our local leaders in Croydon, in Somerset, in Hertfordshire, people across the political spectrum who say, why not just give the councils the money to get on with this? Why tie this up in bureaucracy and red tape? How much of this money has simply been rebadged from other previously announced government programmes? Why the change in methodology? Can she set out, in the interest of transparency before the House, how it is the case that the funding seems to be landing now in areas more likely to support the party in government? How much, Madam Deputy Speaker, how much of this funding sits outside of the Spending Review 2025 and is therefore deeply in question from the start? How much of this money, like so many of this government's announcements, for example, on housing, has been put in the public domain, but promises spending towards the tail end of the next Parliament, perhaps the very definition of jam tomorrow? And finally, can she tell us, how will this announcement today, how will it help small businesses on all of our high streets across our country to recover from her colleague, the Chancellor's £2.7 billion tax hike in this year alone?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to say I am disappointed by the lack of attrition, by the failure to say sorry of the honourable member. They presided over 14 years of failure in which, over a period of austerity, local government and local civic institutions were denuded, where communities who were deprived were hollowed out. He says that we're funding areas with deprivation because we actually care about funding areas of deprivation. So candidly, if I was sitting on the record of the last government, I would not be standing there giving us lectures. So let me pick up the specific questions that he asks. Firstly, why are we tying this up in process? There is no process, but we have said communities should be in charge. The difference between this scheme and the things done by the last government is that we want to put communities in the driving seat and give them power. So absolutely, we want local authorities to enable and to facilitate, but we absolutely need our community leaders. Members across the House will know them. The people who are networked, the people who are championed, the people who are making change happen, we want them round the table driving the change that their community needs. On the methodology, we, unlike the party opposite, who obviously did some fiddling, we do not do that. We have focused on two metrics, the metric of multiple deprivation and community needs. That is putting investment in the areas that most need it because they are both deprived but critically have low social infrastructure and social capital. That is why we're funding the areas that we are funding. We all remember their last Prime Minister saying that they actively diverted funding away from areas of deprivation. That is something that this side will not do and has not done. And then finally, in terms of the funding profile, we are desperate to move with momentum We want to get the investment out. It is a 10-year commitment. That is absolutely a game changer, and we know that. To say to communities, come up with an investment plan and we will fund you over a decade, no government has done that. We think that is game-changing for communities on the ground. But we are not going to wait. So already in places that were in the phase 1 of this, the 75 places, we are already giving them capital investment in order to start the work at kick-starting that programme, and then their funding will flow next year. In the new tranche of phase 2, capital and capacity investment will be going into them from next year and then flowing in the year after. We are very, very clear about the opportunity for our communities. This isn't about party politics, so I'm incredibly disappointed by the other side. This is an opportunity to support parts of our country that have been absolutely hollowed out. I'd expect a bit more contrition because of your record, because you sat, because you're on...
Order, Minister. Because of your record, my record, because of you, mine, let's temper our language, lower the temperature, continue.
Apologies, Madam Deputy Speaker. Because of their record, I would expect a little bit more contrition. Now, we are focused on the task ahead, which is the opportunity to drive change in our communities, and I hope members across the House can join us in that endeavour.
Nav Mishra.
Speaker, the £5 billion investment in Pride in Place programme means that Brinnington and Stockport will benefit from a £20 million investment. I wonder if what the Minister thinks of the former government's slogan, levelling up slogan, which in reality was a levelling down agenda in terms of opportunity, ambition and trust.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is completely right. Levelling up was a hollow slogan. We've seen from the records that there was no substance behind it. Unlike the party opposite, we are doing the job of investing in our communities, putting them in the driving seat. And in constituencies like my honourable friends, that will be a game changer.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Liberal Democrats, I welcome the Minister to her place, and Liberal Democrats welcome the government's commitment to investing in high streets and communities. Making our local centres thrive is a cause that we all share across this House. But the strategy, despite talking about empowerment and the government previously announcing it would simplify the system, consolidate grants, this strategy does the opposite by creating a patchwork of certain areas, small ring-fence grants with strict rules on how local authorities can spend that funding. But what is perhaps as important is what goes unsaid in the strategy. The importance of community assets like libraries and swimming pools is acknowledged, and lamenting of their loss is included in the strategy. However, the strategy neglects to mention the deeper causes of those sell-offs. Local authorities face ever-growing crises in funding statutory services they have to fund according to government rules, particularly social care and special educational needs and disabilities, and are forced to sell assets to keep those services going. This year alone, £1.3 billion of public assets have been sold off, almost 3 times the annual funding announced today. In Taunton and Wellington and Somerset, in my constituency, over 2/3 of council tax payments go towards funding care for children and adults. Last year, the county successfully plugged a £55 million shortfall, but that feat is going to get harder and harder every year. Pride in Place will struggle to succeed unless the government fixes the care crisis. Council taxpayers should not be bailing out the government's duty to provide a care and send system that works. Investment in high streets is welcome, but is no substitute for giving local authorities the means to protect their services and assets into the future. So will the Minister set out what plans the government has to relieve the care funding crisis at local level so that communities can keep and maintain the services and assets they most value?
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you to the honourable gentleman. So let me take each of those points in turn. This is about empowerment. We are driving through the biggest boost to devolution that we have seen, we believe, in a generation. And there are 3 strands to that. Absolutely, it is about putting communities at the very heart of this. And the reason why we have designed this in a way that doesn't just mean that local authorities are in the driving seat is because we think it's really critical that we put community leaders at the heart of this. This is an opportunity for us to galvanise our communities, to get people from diverse backgrounds around the table, and then critically to build momentum to drive the change that people want to see. And we don't resolve from that, and we think that is absolutely the right approach. Alongside that, though, we are giving more power to local authorities. So whether that is multi-year funding, whether that is consolidating the local government finance system so that they have greater flexibility, we see local authorities as a key partner in driving change on the ground. And then alongside that, the biggest tranche of devolution to our city region and county region mayors that we have seen as we create strategic authority. So alongside each other, we think this is fundamentally shifting and transferring power from the centre through to places so that we can deliver the change that people want. There has been a huge sell-off of assets, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that is the legacy of the last 14 years, and it's a tragedy for our communities. This is why we have introduced a community right to buy, so that communities have the ability to say assets of community value, and they have the ability to buy those. And with support, for example, from Pride in Place, there's the opportunity to put the investment behind that. And then finally, on the critical issue of funding of local government, we on this side of the House absolutely understand the pressure that local government is under. There's been 14 years of austerity driven by the party opposite, and local authorities are having to deal with a very difficult context. That's why we've moved towards multi-year funding settlement. That's why we gave a huge boost to local government financing last year. And over the course of the spending review, there will be a real terms increase in local government spending power. It is tight, but we are doing our part as government to make sure that local government can deliver for our communities. And my colleagues in the Department of Health and Social Care are driving through critical reforms that will address some of the pressures that we know exist in our social care system.
Paula Barker.
I welcome this Labour government's £20 million investment in Fairfield in my constituency of Liverpool Wavertree, who were ignored by the Conservatives. Does the Minister agree with me that it's crucial that this programme is not just new money, but also new powers for local people to decide how it's spent? And will the Minister confirm, for the avoidance of doubt, that the money should not be used to deliver core council services?
Thank you to my honourable friend. Absolutely. Let me put it on record. We want communities to be in the driving seat of this. This is why it differs from other programmes that have been done under the last government. And if we get that right, it has a huge galvanising potential. And the thing that we absolutely want to mitigate against is that this just goes towards business as usual. I think if we can get it right, and if we can organise and bring people around the table from communities and get them to invest in the things that matter to them, but also can generate community wealth, this potentially is a game changer.
Sir Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Honourable Lady on her new role and perhaps strike a slightly more consensual approach? In Sutton Coldfield, we welcome this initiative. It's good that it builds on the Towns Fund set up by the last government. We're very pleased in the Royal Town to be part of this. Can I tell the Honourable Lady that we are undertaking extensive community consultation led by the leader of the Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Council, Simon Ward, and the Council, and that our local board, under the chairmanship of Doug Wright MBE, is forging ahead and is already making very considerable progress. And can I invite her, as I did her predecessor, to pay a state visit to the Royal Town of Sutton Coldfield, where she can see how we are going to use this money to the best possible advantage.
Madam Deputy, thank you to the honourable gentleman for showing us and telling us about the progress in his patch. It is incredibly encouraging to see the work that is already being done, whether that is through the local authority, whether that is existing boards, whether that's community leaders coming together. And the thing I would ask all members is where there is good example of where this is working well, to reach out to other members across the House so that that example can be shared. And I look forward to travelling across the country and seeing Pride in Place in practice.
Lawrence Turner.
very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to warmly welcome the 20 million Pride in Place funding for the Hawksley estate in my constituency. It stands in stark contrast to the hopes and expectations that were allowed to be built under the last government for the second round bid for the Levelling Up Fund, £11 million for Northfield High Street, which was cruelly dashed when not one penny was allocated to the City of Birmingham. Does she agree that this won't be and can't be some lengthy bureaucratic process? Of course, our councils must be essential partners, but the priorities will be set in the communities themselves.
Thank you to my honourable friend. Absolutely. We are trying to make this as permissive as possible, and we want communities to generally choose the schemes and the projects that work in their area. So we are very, very clear. As long as the community represented in the neighbourhood board are behind an area, as long as they are confident it delivers value for money for the community, we will step aside and let them get on with it, and that is absolutely the right approach.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Rowner were delighted to hear that they had been chosen for Pride of Place funding, but they're now a little bit worried, and I'm hoping that the Minister can help us, that instead of this money being spent in projects that will meaningfully change lives in Rowner, that our local Liberal Democrat council will attempt to siphon some of this money off to bankroll one of their vanity projects, namely the Criterion, which is a dilapidated former bingo hall. Now, while I'm really pleased that this funding comes with some flexibility, what protections is the Minister going to put in place to stop this money being frittered away on white elephants by unscrupulous local councils?